Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. My name is Special Agent Marcus Keenan, and I've been with the Los Angeles field office for 9 years. I've worked everything from organized crime to counterterrorism, but nothing prepared me for what started on October the 3rd, 2023. It was a Tuesday morning, just after 6 a.m. when my phone rang. I was already awake, sitting in my apartment in Culver City, drinking black coffee and reading through case files from an ongoing fraud investigation. The call came from dispatch. A body had been discovered in Griffith Park, and LAPD wanted bureau assistance. The location was remote, the circumstances unclear, and there were already whispers that something about the scene didn't feel right. I grabbed my credentials, my service weapon, and my jacket, then headed out into the gray Los Angeles dawn. Traffic on the 10 was light at that hour, and I made it to the park's eastern entrance in under 30 minutes. The sky was that particular shade of pre-dawn purple that makes the city feel empty, even though millions of people are sleeping just a few miles away in every direction. Griffith Park is one of the largest urban wilderness areas in North America. Over 4,000 acres of chaparral-covered hills, hiking trails, and dense brush. It's a place where people go to escape the city without leaving it. But it's also a place where things get lost. Bodies, evidence, people who don't want to be found. The park has a long history, and not all of it is pleasant. There have been suicides, murders, accidental deaths. The land has a weight to it, a sense of watching. When I arrived at the staging area near the Griffith Observatory Access Road, there were already 4 LAPD patrol units, 2 unmarked detective sedans, and a coroner's van waiting. A young, uniformed officer directed me up a narrow fire road that wound into the hills above Los Feliz. I parked behind one of the detective cars and got out. The air was cool and smelled like eucalyptus and dry brush. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the faint hum of the city waking up. But here, surrounded by scrub oak and chaparral, it felt like we were 100 miles from civilization. Detective Laura Briggs from LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division met me at the trailhead. She was in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed, with dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. We'd worked together before on a kidnapping case in 2021, and I respected her instincts. She looked tired, like she'd been up all night, and there was something in her expression that put me on edge. "Keenan," she said, shaking my hand. "Thanks for coming out. This one's strange." "Strange how?" I asked. She hesitated, glancing back toward the trail. "You'll see. It's about a quarter mile up. Hiker found the body around 5 this morning. He was trail running, saw something off the path, went to investigate. Called 911 immediately. He's pretty shaken up." We started walking. The trail was narrow, winding through dense brush and low trees. The ground was dry and rocky, and our boots crunched on the gravel. As we climbed higher, the city spread out below us, a vast grid of lights and streets stretching to the horizon. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and orange. "What do we know about the victim?" I asked. "Female, mid-30s, no ID on the body. She's been dead at least 12 hours, maybe longer. No obvious cause of death, no signs of trauma that we can see. But there's something off about the scene. The way the body's positioned, the lack of blood, She trailed off, shaking her head. "I don't know. It just doesn't feel right." We rounded a bend in the trail, and I saw the crime scene ahead. Yellow tape had been strung between 2 trees, cordoning off a small clearing about 20 feet off the main path. There were 2 crime scene techs in white Tyvek suits, carefully photographing the area. A third tech was crouched near the body, taking samples. The coroner, a thin man in his 60s named Raymond Lyle, stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching. I ducked under the tape and approached the body. She was lying on her back, arms at her sides, legs straight. She was wearing jeans, a gray sweater, and running shoes. Her eyes were open, staring up at the sky. There was no blood, no visible wounds, no signs of a struggle. She looked almost peaceful, like she'd just laid down to rest. But there was something wrong. I felt it immediately. The positioning was too perfect, too deliberate. Her hair was arranged neatly around her head. Her clothes were clean, free of dirt or debris. And the ground around her was undisturbed. No drag marks, no footprints, nothing to suggest how she'd gotten there. "Any signs of sexual assault?" I asked. Dr. Lyle shook his head. "Not that I can see. We'll know more after the autopsy, but preliminary examination doesn't show anything obvious. No ligature marks, no bruising, no defensive wounds. It's like she just stopped." I knelt down next to the body, careful not to disturb anything. The woman's skin was pale, almost translucent in the early morning light. Her lips were slightly parted, as if she'd been about to say something. I looked at her hands. No dirt under the nails, no signs of a fight. Her fingertips were clean. "What about lividity?" I asked. "Consistent with her position," Dr. Lyle said. "She died here, or was placed here very shortly after death, but there's something else. Her body temperature is lower than it should be, given the ambient temperature and estimated time of death. It's like she was kept cold somewhere before being moved." I stood up, looking around the clearing. The brush was thick on all sides, creating a natural barrier. There was only one clear path in, the trail we'd just walked. I turned in a slow circle, taking in the scene. The trees, the rocks, the dry grass. Everything looked normal, ordinary, but the feeling persisted. Something was wrong. "Has anyone canvassed the area?" I asked Briggs. "We've got uniforms walking the trails, talking to early morning hikers. So far, no one saw anything unusual. No vehicles parked in strange places, no one acting suspicious. It's like she appeared out of nowhere." I walked to the edge of the clearing, examining the brush. There were no broken branches, no trampled vegetation. If someone had carried her body through here, they'd done it without leaving a trace. I looked back at the woman. Who was she? How did she get here? And why did the scene feel so staged? One of the crime scene techs called out, "Detective Briggs, you need to see this." We walked over. The tech was pointing at the ground near the woman's left hand. At first, I didn't see anything unusual, just dirt and small rocks. Then I saw it. A pattern in the dust. It looked almost like a footprint, but the edges were blurred, indistinct. And the size was wrong. Too large, too elongated. The tech had marked it with a small evidence flag. "What is that?" Briggs asked. The tech shrugged. "I don't know. It doesn't match any shoe tread in our database. And look at the depth. It's barely an impression, like whatever made it was barely touching the ground." I took out my phone and snapped a few photos. The pattern was strange. Organic, almost, but not quite human. I made a mental note to send the images to our forensic lab for analysis. "Bag it and tag it," I said. "Let's get everything we can from this scene. I want soil samples, vegetation samples, everything within a 50-foot radius processed." As the techs continued their work, I pulled Briggs aside. "What about the hiker who found her? Is he still around?" Uniform took his statement. "He's waiting down by the road if you want to talk to him." We walked back down the trail. The sun was fully up now. and the temperature was starting to climb. By noon, it would be in the 80s, typical for October in Los Angeles. The hiker was sitting in the back of a patrol car, a bottle of water in his hands. He was in his late 20s, lean and fit, wearing running gear. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking slightly. I introduced myself and asked him to walk me through what happened. His name was Derek Paulson, and he lived in Silver Lake. He'd been running the same trail 3 times a week for the past year. This morning, he'd started his run just before 5, when it was still dark. He liked running early, he said, before the park got crowded. I was about 20 minutes in when I saw something off the trail, he said, his voice shaky. At first, I thought it was a sleeping bag or some trash. But then I got closer and saw it was a person, a woman. I called out to her, thought maybe she was sleeping or hurt, but she didn't move. I got closer and I could see her eyes were open. That's when I knew. "Did you touch anything?" I asked. He shook his head quickly. "No, I backed away immediately and called 911. I waited on the trail until the police arrived." "Did you see anyone else on the trail? Any other hikers? Any vehicles?" "No one. It was completely empty. That's why I like running early. I usually have the place to myself." I asked him about the days leading up to this morning. Had he noticed anything unusual in the park? Any strange people? Any unusual activity? He thought for a moment, then mentioned something that caught my attention. "Actually, yeah. About a week ago, I was running the same trail in the evening, around sunset. I saw someone standing off the path, maybe 50 yards away, just standing there, watching. It was weird because they were so still. I waved, but they didn't move. I figured they were just enjoying the view, but it gave me a strange feeling." "Can you describe them?" "Not really. They were too far away and the light was fading. Just a silhouette against the sky, tall, I think, wearing dark clothes. But I couldn't see their face. I made a note of this. If we need to talk to you again, you'll be available." "Of course," he said. "Anything I can do to help." I thanked him and walked back to the crime scene. The body was being loaded into a black bag, ready for transport to the coroner's office. Dr. Lyle approached me, pulling off his latex gloves. "I'll have preliminary results by this afternoon," he said. "But I'm telling you now, this one's going to be difficult. Without obvious trauma, we're looking at toxicology, internal examination, maybe environmental factors. It could take weeks to determine cause of death. Do your best," I said, "and fast-track the toxicology if you can." As the coroner's van pulled away, I stood at the edge of the clearing looking out over the city. Somewhere down there, someone knew who this woman was. Someone was waiting for her to come home. And somewhere, there was an answer to what happened here. But as I stood there in the morning sun, surrounded by the vast emptiness of Griffith Park, I had the distinct feeling that finding that answer was going to be more complicated than any case I'd worked before. That feeling, it turned out, was right. By noon, we had set up a command post at the Los Angeles field office on Wilshire Boulevard. The victim's body was at the coroner's office undergoing autopsy. Crime scene evidence was being processed at the FBI's forensic lab. And I was sitting in a conference room with Briggs, a forensic analyst named Rick Torres, and my partner, Special Agent Jennifer Vasquez. Vasquez had been with the Bureau for 6 years, most of that time in white-collar crime before transferring to violent crimes. She was methodical, analytical, and had a talent for seeing patterns that others missed. She'd spent the morning reviewing the crime scene photos and the initial reports, and she had questions. "The positioning bothers me," she said, pointing at an image on her laptop screen. "Look at how symmetrical everything is. Her arms, her legs, even her hair. This wasn't accidental. Someone arranged her this way." "Staging," Torres said. "Classic sign of a personal connection. Someone who knew her, who cared about how she looked in death. Or someone sending a message, Briggs added. I pulled up the photos of the strange footprint. What about this? Any progress on identification? Torres shook his head. I've run it through every database we have. It doesn't match any known shoe pattern, boot tread, or even animal track. The dimensions are all wrong. It's almost like it was made by something that was barely there. Meaning what? Vasquez asked. I don't know, Torres admitted. The pressure distribution is inconsistent with normal human locomotion. And look at the edges. They're blurred, like the image was slightly out of focus. But it's not an artifact of the photography. The physical impression in the dirt shows the same characteristics. I sat back, thinking. Nothing about this case made sense. No ID, no cause of death, no clear crime scene, and physical evidence that defied explanation. We needed to identify the victim. That was the first priority. What about missing persons reports? I asked Vasquez. I've been checking. There are 3 women reported missing in the LA area in the past 72 hours who match the general description. I've requested dental records and photos. We should have something by this afternoon. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Dr. Lyle. Preliminary autopsy results ready. Call when you can. I stepped out of the conference room and dialed his number. He picked up on the first ring. Keenan, he said, and there was something in his voice that made me tense. You need to come down here. There's something I need to show you in person. 20 minutes later, I was standing in the Los Angeles County Coroner's office, following Dr. Lyle through sterile white corridors that smelled of disinfectant and something else. Something chemical and unpleasant. We entered an examination room where the victim's body lay on a stainless steel table, covered by a white sheet. Dr. Lyle pulled on fresh gloves and folded back the sheet, revealing the woman's torso. Her skin was pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. He pointed to several areas on her chest and abdomen. No external trauma, as we noted at the scene, he said. But when I opened her up, I found something unusual. Massive internal hemorrhaging in multiple organ systems. Liver, spleen, kidneys. It's like something caused catastrophic damage to her internal organs without leaving any external marks. Blunt force trauma? That was my first thought. But there's no bruising, no broken ribs, no signs of impact. And the pattern of damage doesn't match any mechanism of injury I've seen before. It's like her organs just failed all at once. He pulled up a series of images on a nearby computer screen. I saw cross-sections of organs, tissue samples, blood work results. Everything looked wrong. Tissues that should have been healthy were damaged. Cells that should have been intact were destroyed. Toxicology. That's the other strange thing. I found traces of several compounds in her system that I can't identify. They're not in any database. They're not drugs, not poisons, not anything I've encountered before. I've sent samples to the FBI lab for advanced analysis, but preliminary results suggest these compounds aren't synthetic. They're biological in origin. Biological? Like bacteria or viruses? I don't think so. The molecular structures are too complex, too organized. It's like nothing I've seen. I looked down at the woman's face. Her eyes had been closed now, giving her a more peaceful appearance. But there was nothing peaceful about what had happened to her. She had died in agony, her body destroying itself from the inside. What about identification? I asked. No hits on fingerprints. Her dental work is minimal. No fillings, no crowns, nothing distinctive. I've documented all identifying features. A small scar on her left knee, a birthmark on her right shoulder. But without a match in the system, we're going to need DNA or someone to come forward with a missing persons report that fits. I thanked Dr. Lyle and headed back to the office. On the drive, I called Vasquez with an update. She'd made progress on the missing persons reports. One of the women had been located safe in San Diego, and another had turned up at her mother's house in Orange County. That left one possibility. Natalie Greer, a 34-year-old freelance graphic designer who lived in Echo Park and had been reported missing by her roommate 2 days ago. By the time I got back to the office, Vasquez had tracked down the roommate, a woman named Michelle Torres, who worked as a barista in Silver Lake. We drove out to meet her at the coffee shop where she worked, a small independent place on Sunset Boulevard with exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture. Michelle was in her late 20s, with dyed blue hair and multiple piercings. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. She led us to a corner table away from the other customers and sat down heavily. "Is it her?" she asked immediately. "Is it Natalie?" "We don't know yet," I said gently. "We need to ask you some questions to help with identification. Can you tell us about Natalie? When did you last see her?" Michelle took a shaky breath. "Sunday night, she went for a walk. She does that sometimes when she's stressed about work. She said she was going to Griffith Park to clear her head. She likes to watch the sunset from one of the trails, but she never came back." "Did she go alone?" "Yeah, always. Natalie liked being by herself. She was kind of introverted, you know. Needed that alone time to recharge." "Did she mention anything unusual? Anyone following her? Anyone making her uncomfortable?" Michelle thought for a moment. "Not recently, but about 2 weeks ago she said something weird. She was coming back from a run in the park and she said she felt like someone was watching her. She couldn't see anyone, but she had this feeling. She kind of laughed it off, said she was being paranoid." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. "Did she describe this feeling in any more detail?" "She said it was like cold spots, you know? Like when you walk past an open freezer at the grocery store. She felt these pockets of cold air on the trail, even though it was a warm day. And she kept turning around, thinking someone was behind her, but no one was ever there." Vasquez and I exchanged a glance. This matched the hiker's report of seeing someone standing motionless on the trail. But cold spots? That was new. "Does Natalie have any dental records we could access? Any medical records?" "Her dentist is in Pasadena. I can get you the name. And she goes to a clinic in Los Feliz for routine stuff. I have her insurance information at home." We collected all the details we needed and promised to keep Michelle updated. As we drove back to the office, Vasquez voiced what I was thinking. Cold spots. People watching from the shadows. A feeling of being followed. This is starting to sound less like a murder investigation and more like something else. "We follow the evidence," I said. "That's all we can do." But even as I said it, I knew this case was different. There was something about Griffith Park, about the way Natalie Greer had died that didn't fit into any normal investigative framework. And as the afternoon wore on, things only got stranger. By 5 p.m., we had confirmation from dental records. The body was indeed Natalie Greer. We notified her family, her parents lived in Sacramento, and began the process of building a timeline of her final days. Her phone had been found at the crime scene, undamaged. Our tech team was able to access it, and what they found raised more questions than answers. The last text message Natalie had sent was to Michelle on Sunday evening at 6:47 p.m. "Heading to the park. Back soon." Her phone's GPS showed her location at that time as her apartment in Echo Park. Then, at 7:03 p.m., her phone registered a location on the Hogback Trail in Griffith Park. After that, nothing. No more texts, no calls, no app usage. The phone had stayed in that location until it was recovered by crime scene techs. But here's where it got strange. The phone's internal sensors, accelerometer, gyroscope, ambient light, showed anomalous readings starting at 7:15 p.m. and continuing for approximately 30 minutes. The accelerometer recorded sudden, violent movements that didn't match any normal activity. The ambient light sensor fluctuated wildly, going from complete darkness to bright light and back again, despite the fact that sunset on Sunday had been at 6:32 p.m. and civil twilight had ended by 7 o'clock p.m. What could cause this? Vasquez asked the tech analyst, a young woman named Sarah Kim. I don't know, Kim said, scrolling through the data. It's like the phone was being shaken violently while being exposed to strobe lights. But there's no video or photo data from that time period. And look at this. The temperature sensor shows a drop of 15 degrees in less than 2 minutes. That shouldn't be possible. I looked at the graph on her screen. The temperature reading went from 68 degrees Fahrenheit to 53 degrees in a span of 120 seconds, then slowly climbed back up over the next hour. Combined with Natalie's earlier experience of cold spots in the park, this was beginning to form a pattern. What about the camera? I asked. Did she take any photos that evening? Kim pulled up Natalie's photo gallery. The last photo had been taken at 7:04 p.m., a picture of the trail ahead, bathed in the last light of sunset. The composition was simple. A dirt path winding upward through Chaparral, with the city visible in the background. But there was something in the image that made me lean closer. In the lower right corner, partially obscured by a bush, there appeared to be a shadow. It was human-shaped, tall and thin, but the proportions were wrong. The arms seemed too long, the head too small, and it was completely black, without any internal detail or texture. Can you enhance this? I asked. Kim worked her magic with image processing software, zooming in on the shadow, adjusting contrast and brightness. As the image became clearer, I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. The shadow didn't have a source. The sun was setting in the west, which would cast shadows to the east, but this shadow was in the wrong position. It couldn't have been cast by a person standing on the trail. Run a geometric analysis, I said. I want to know if that shadow is consistent with any possible light source. Kim worked for several minutes, overlaying angles and light direction models on the image. Finally, she looked up, her face pale. It's not possible, she said. There's no light source in the frame that could create that shadow in that location. And look at the edges, they're too sharp. Real shadows have gradations, softening at the edges due to light diffusion. This is like it was cut out with scissors. Vasquez was looking at me, and I could see the question in her eyes. What are we dealing with? That night, I stayed late at the office, reviewing all the evidence we'd collected. The anomalous phone data, the impossible shadow in the photo, the strange footprint at the crime scene, the unexplained cause of death. Every piece of evidence pointed toward something that didn't make rational sense. I pulled up the file on Griffith Park's history. It had been donated to the city in 1896 by Colonel Griffith J. Griffith, a mining magnate with a dark history. In 1903, Griffith had shot his wife in a drunken rage at a Santa Monica hotel. She survived, but was partially blinded. Griffith served time for attempted murder. Later, he tried to donate money to build an observatory in the park, but the city refused his tainted funds. It wasn't until after his death that the Griffith Observatory was finally built. Over the years, the park had been the site of numerous deaths and disappearances. In 1933, a massive brush fire killed 29 people. In the 1970s and 80s, several murders had occurred in remote areas of the park. And there were persistent rumors of strange occurrences. Hikers reporting feelings of being watched, unexplained sounds, cold spots, and sightings of shadowy figures that disappeared when approached. I didn't believe in ghosts or supernatural phenomena, I was a federal agent trained in evidence-based investigation. But as I sat there in my office, looking at the shadow in Natalie Greer's photo, I couldn't shake the feeling that this case was going to challenge everything I thought I knew about reality. My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. It was Torres, the forensic analyst. "Keenan, we've got a problem with the crime scene photos," he said. "I need you to come to the lab, now." I grabbed my jacket and drove to the FBI's forensic facility in Westwood. Torres met me at the entrance, looking agitated. He led me to a computer workstation where crime scene photos were displayed on multiple monitors. "I've been doing standard processing on these images," he said. "Enhancing details, documenting evidence, but look at this." He pulled up a series of photos taken at different times during the crime scene investigation. The first batch had been shot by LAPD techs around 5:30 a.m. just after the body was discovered. The second batch was taken by FBI techs around 8 o'clock a.m. after I'd arrived. The third batch was shot around 9:30 a.m. just before the body was removed. "Watch this," Torres said. He played them in sequence, creating a stop-motion effect. In the background of the photos, behind the crime scene tape and beyond the clearing where Natalie's body lay, there was something moving in the brush. It wasn't immediately obvious, just a slight shift in shadows, a suggestion of movement. But when Torres isolated those sections and enhanced them, I saw it clearly. There was a shape moving through the brush. It was tall and thin, moving in a way that didn't seem quite right. The movement was too smooth, too fluid, and in one frame, for just a fraction of a second, it seemed to turn towards the camera. "What the hell is that?" I said. "I don't know, but it appears in 17 different photographs taken over a 4-hour period. It's always in the background, always at the edge of the frame. And here's the thing. None of the people at the scene saw anything. I've checked with all the techs, all the officers. No one reported seeing anyone else in that area." He pulled up another image, this one from a different angle. The shape was closer now, maybe 30 feet from the crime scene. It was in shadow, making it difficult to see details, but the outline was distinctly humanoid, except for the proportions. The limbs were too long, the torso too narrow. "Could it be a trick of light?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. "I've run every analysis I can think of. It's not a shadow artifact, it's not lens flare, it's not digital noise. There was something there, moving through the brush while we were processing the scene." I felt a chill run down my spine. Whatever had killed Natalie Greer, it had been there watching us the entire time we were investigating. And we hadn't seen it. "I want thermal imaging analysis of these photos," I said. "If there was something alive in that brush, it should show up on thermal." "Already done," Torres said. "That's what I wanted to show you." He pulled up thermal overlays of the crime scene photos. Most of the image showed exactly what you'd expect. Cool blues and greens for the ground and vegetation. Warm yellows and oranges for the people at the scene. But in the area where the shape had been moving, there was nothing. No heat signature at all. "That's not possible," I said. "Everything has a heat signature. Even cold-blooded animals, even reptiles. There should be something." "I know," Torres said quietly. "But there isn't. It's like whatever was there wasn't warm enough to register. Or it wasn't there at all." I drove home that night in a daze. It was late, past midnight, and the freeways were nearly empty. I lived in a small house in Mar Vista, not far from the beach. It was a quiet neighborhood, mostly families and young professionals, safe, ordinary, normal. But as I pulled into my driveway and killed the engine, I sat there for a moment, reluctant to get out of the car. The street was dark, lit only by occasional streetlights. The houses were silent, everyone asleep. and I had the distinct, uncomfortable feeling that I was being watched. I scanned the street, the shadows between houses, the dark windows. Nothing moved. There was no one there. But the feeling persisted. I got out of the car quickly and walked to my front door, keys already in hand. As I unlocked the door, I glanced back over my shoulder. For just a moment, I thought I saw something. A dark shape standing beneath a tree across the street. Tall, thin, motionless. I blinked, and it was gone. I went inside and locked the door behind me, my heart pounding. I was exhausted, I told myself. My mind was playing tricks on me. I'd been working too hard, looking at evidence that didn't make sense, letting the strangeness of the case get under my skin. But that night I didn't sleep well. I kept waking up, listening to the sounds of the house settling, the wind in the trees outside. And once, around 3 a.m, I woke to the sound of something moving in my backyard. I got up and looked out the bedroom window. The backyard was empty, bathed in pale moonlight. But near the fence at the back of the property, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A set of footprints in the damp grass. Long, elongated, with blurred edges, just like the one we'd found at the crime scene. I grabbed my service weapon and a flashlight and went outside. The grass was wet with dew, and the air was cold. I walked to the fence, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The footprints were there, clear as day, leading from the gate to the back door of my house and then returning to the fence. Something had been in my yard. Something had walked right up to my door. I checked the fence gate. It was locked. I checked the perimeter. Nothing was disturbed. But those footprints were real, and they were fresh. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat in my living room with all the lights on, my weapon on the coffee table, and waited for dawn. The next morning, I returned to the office with a new sense of urgency. I didn't mention the footprints in my yard to anyone. How could I? What would I say? That I thought something from the crime scene had followed me home? It sounded insane, even to me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this case was becoming personal. Whatever had killed Natalie Greer was now aware of me, aware that I was investigating. And it didn't appreciate the attention. Vasquez was already in the conference room when I arrived, surrounded by files and printouts. She looked up as I entered, and I could see concern in her eyes. "You look terrible," she said. "Didn't sleep well," I replied. "What do we have?" She spread out a series of reports on the table. "I've been digging into Griffith Park's recent history. In the past 5 years, there have been 12 deaths in the park. Most were ruled accidental. Falls, heart attacks, 1 suicide. But 3 remain unexplained." She pulled out 3 case files. September 2019, a hiker named Michael Chen was found dead on the observatory trail. No cause of death ever determined. His body showed the same kind of internal damage that Natalie's did. July 2021. A woman named Rebecca Martinez was found near the old zoo. Same story. Massive internal hemorrhaging, no external trauma. And just 6 months ago, March 2023, a man named David Porter, found on the Hogback Trail. Same location where Natalie was found. Same unexplained internal injuries. I felt my stomach drop. Why wasn't this connected before? Different investigators, different jurisdictions. The first 2 were handled by LAPD, the third by park rangers. No one put the pattern together because there was no pattern to see, no obvious connection beyond the location. "Until now," I said. Vasquez nodded. "Until now. 4 deaths, all in Griffith Park, all with the same characteristics. And I'd be willing to bet that if we could access their phones, we'd find the same anomalous sensor data." I sat down heavily. This wasn't just a murder investigation anymore. This was something bigger, something that had been happening for years, and we were just now seeing it. "We need to go back to the park," I said. "Tonight. I want to see that trail after dark, see if we can witness whatever these people experienced." Vasquez looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "That's not protocol, Keenan. We should bring in a full team, get Park Service involved, do this properly. And say what? That we think there's something supernatural killing people in Griffith Park? They'll laugh us out of the building." I leaned forward. "I need to see this myself. I need to understand what we're dealing with." She studied my face for a long moment. "What aren't you telling me?" I hesitated, then decided she deserved to know. I told her about the footprints in my yard, about the feeling of being watched. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "This is dangerous," she finally said. "If this thing, whatever it is, can follow you home," "I know," I said. "But we don't have a choice. More people are going to die unless we figure this out." She sighed. "Fine, but we do this smart. Body cameras, thermal imaging equipment, full tactical gear, and we let someone know where we're going." We spent the rest of the day preparing. I requisitioned equipment from the FBI's tactical unit: night vision goggles, thermal cameras, high-powered flashlights, and body cameras that would record everything. We filed a vague report about conducting a nighttime survey of the crime scene, enough to cover ourselves legally but not enough to raise questions. At 8 p.m. we met at the same staging area where I'd first arrived 3 days ago. The sun had set an hour earlier, and the park was closed to the public. We were the only ones there, surrounded by dark hills and the distant glow of the city below. We geared up in silence. Body cameras clipped to our vests, night vision goggles ready, but not yet activated. We were both carrying our service weapons, though I had no illusion that they would be useful against whatever was out there. "Ready?" Vasquez asked. "As I'll ever be," I replied. We started up the trail. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the path ahead. The park was different at night. Sounds were amplified, shadows were deeper, and every rustling bush or snapping twig made my hand drift toward my weapon. It took 15 minutes to reach the crime scene. The yellow tape was still up, fluttering in the night breeze. The clearing looked smaller in the darkness, more enclosed. I pulled out the thermal camera and did a slow scan of the area. "Anything?" Vasquez asked. "Nothing unusual, just ambient temperature readings, some small animals in the brush." I lowered the camera. "Let's walk the trail. See if we can replicate Natalie's experience." We continued up the path, moving slowly, scanning the area around us. The trail climbed higher into the hills, away from the lights of the city. The only sounds were our footsteps and the distant hum of traffic on the 101 freeway. Then, about 20 minutes into our walk, I felt it. A drop in temperature. Sudden and dramatic, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. My breath came out in visible puffs, and I saw Vasquez shiver beside me. "You feel that?" I whispered. She nodded, her hand moving to her weapon. "Where's it coming from?" I pulled out the thermal camera again. The temperature reading showed a drop of almost 20 degrees in a 10-foot radius around us. But there was no source. No cold air blowing from anywhere. No weather phenomenon that could explain it. And then I saw it. On the thermal display, about 30 feet ahead on the trail, there was a void. A space where there should have been thermal data, but there was nothing. It was like looking at a hole in reality, a space where heat simply ceased to exist. "Vasquez," I said quietly, "look at this." She leaned over, and I saw her face go pale as she looked at the thermal display. "What is that?" "I don't know, but I think we're about to find out." I switched on my night vision goggles. The world turned green and grainy, but objects became clearer. And there, standing motionless on the trail ahead, was something that made every rational thought in my mind scream in protest. It was tall, easily 7 feet, and impossibly thin. Its limbs were elongated, hanging at its sides with a stillness that no living thing should possess. It had a vaguely human shape, but the proportions were all wrong, and where its face should have been, there was nothing but darkness. "Do you see it?" I whispered to Vasquez. Her voice was barely audible. "Jesus Christ, what is that?" The shape didn't move. It just stood there, as if waiting, or watching. I felt my training kick in, my mind trying to categorize what I was seeing, trying to fit it into some framework I could understand. But there was no framework. This was something beyond my experience, beyond anything I'd been trained to handle. I reached for my body camera, making sure it was recording. Whatever happened next, there needed to be evidence. "FBI!" I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the silent park. "Identify yourself." No response. The shape remained motionless. I took a step forward, and that's when it moved. It didn't walk, it didn't run. It simply shifted position, and suddenly it was 10 feet closer. No transition, no movement between points. Just there, then here. Vasquez made a small sound of fear. "We need to leave. Now." But I couldn't move. I was transfixed, staring at this impossible thing, trying to understand what I was seeing. My hand moved to my weapon, but some deep instinct told me that a gun would be useless here. The shape moved again, closer still, and now I could see details that made my mind recoil. Its surface seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Where it stood, the world seemed less real, like it was erasing reality just by existing. And the cold. It was radiating from this thing, waves of freezing air that made my teeth chatter. "Keenan!" Vasquez grabbed my arm. "We're leaving!" She pulled me backward, and the spell broke. We turned and ran down the trail, our flashlights bouncing wildly. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if it was following us. We made it back to the parking area in record time, both of us breathing hard, adrenaline pumping through our systems. Only when we were back at our vehicle, doors locked, engine running, did we allow ourselves to process what we'd seen. "What the hell was that?" Vasquez said, her voice shaking. I was pulling off my gear, my hands trembling. "I don't know, but it's what killed Natalie and the others. It has to be. How do we fight something like that? How do we investigate it?" I didn't have an answer. I looked down at my body camera, still recording. "Let's get back to the office, review the footage. There has to be something we can use." The drive back to the federal building was silent. Both of us were lost in our own thoughts, trying to reconcile what we'd seen with our understanding of reality. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that dark shape in the road behind us. At the office, we transferred the body camera footage to a secure computer and started reviewing it. The video showed exactly what we'd experienced. The temperature drop, the strange void on the thermal display, and then, captured in grainy night vision, that impossible shape standing on the trail. But here's where it got strange. When the shape moved, when it shifted position without transitioning, the video glitched. For a fraction of a second, the image distorted, pixelated, as if the camera couldn't process what it was recording. And when the shape was at its closest, there were audio anomalies, a low-frequency hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We need to show this to someone," Vasquez said. "The assistant director, the task force." "And say what?" I interrupted. "That we saw something unexplainable in Griffith Park. That we think some kind of entity is killing people?" They'll pull us from the case and order psychological evaluations. Then what do? I stared at the frozen image on the screen, that dark shape captured in the moment before we ran. We find a way to explain it. There has to be a rational explanation, some kind of natural phenomenon, some environmental factor we don't understand yet. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. What we'd seen wasn't natural. It was something else entirely. Over the next 3 days, I threw myself into research. I consulted with physicists, environmental scientists, psychiatrists. I looked into every possible explanation: mass hallucination, infrasound-induced fear responses, unusual atmospheric conditions, even experimental military technology. Nothing fit. The footage we'd captured was reviewed by experts at the FBI's technical division. They confirmed what we already knew. It was authentic, unaltered, and showed something that shouldn't exist, but they had no explanation for what that something was. During this time, I started experiencing the effects more personally. Every night I heard sounds in my house: footsteps on the roof, scratching at the windows, the sound of breathing in empty rooms. I stopped sleeping in my bedroom and instead dozed on the couch with all the lights on, my weapon within reach. One night I woke to find all the lights off. I knew I'd left them on, but now the house was dark. I grabbed my flashlight and weapon and did a sweep of every room. In my home office, I found something that made my blood run cold. My desk was covered in photos, crime scene photos from the Griffith Park investigation, but they weren't copies I'd brought home. I'd made sure to leave all case files at the office. These were prints, laid out in a specific pattern, and in each photo, someone had circled the same thing in red marker: the background, the shadows, the places where that shape had appeared. Someone, or something, had been in my house going through my investigation, leaving a message. "You're being watched. We know what you're looking for." I called Vasquez immediately. She came over, along with the crime scene tech team. They processed my house, looking for signs of forced entry, fingerprints, DNA. They found nothing. No physical evidence that anyone had been there. Except for the photos. Those were real. "You need to move," Vasquez said. "Stay at a hotel. Go to your parents. Anywhere but here." "That won't help," I said. I was beyond exhaustion now, running on caffeine and stubborn determination. Whatever this is, it knows where I live. It knows what I'm investigating. Running won't change that. "Then we close the case," she said firmly. "We write up what we have, file it as unsolved, and move on. This is too dangerous. More people will die. And you might be one of them." We stared at each other. She was right, of course. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to walk away. But I couldn't. Not when I knew what was out there. Not when I'd seen it with my own eyes. "I'm going back to the park," I said quietly. "Tomorrow night. I need to document this properly, get more evidence. Build a case that can't be dismissed." "That's insane. You saw what that thing can do." "Which is exactly why I need to go back. I need to understand how it kills, how it chooses its victims. If there's a pattern, something we can use to predict where it will appear next." Vasquez was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed. "If you're going, I'm going with you. But this time, we bring backup. Full tactical team, heavy equipment. We do this by the book." I wanted to argue, but I knew she was right. Whatever we were facing, we'd have a better chance with a team. The next morning, I briefed Assistant Director James Carver on the case. I showed him the evidence, the body camera footage, the crime scene analysis. I expected skepticism, maybe even dismissal, but instead he listened carefully, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I didn't expect. "This isn't the first time," he said quietly. these kinds of cases. Unexplained deaths, impossible evidence, things that don't fit into any known framework. They come up more often than you'd think. Usually, we explain them away, find a rational answer even if it doesn't quite fit, because the alternative is too difficult to process. What are you saying? He looked at me directly. I'm saying that you're not crazy. What you've documented is real. But you need to be very careful about how you proceed. Because once you acknowledge what's really happening, once you accept that there are things in the world that don't follow the rules we understand, it changes you. It changes how you see everything. I need to go back to the park, I said, tonight, with a full team. He considered this. I'll approve the operation. But Keenan, if this goes wrong, if anything happens to you or your team, the Bureau will disavow all of it. This will become a training accident, a misunderstanding. We don't officially investigate the unexplainable. I understand. I hope you do, he said. Because after tonight, there's no going back. That evening, 8 of us gathered at the Griffith Park staging area. Me, Vasquez, 4 members of the FBI's hostage rescue team, and 2 technical specialists with advanced monitoring equipment. We were armed, equipped, and as prepared as we could be for an encounter with something that defied explanation. The mission parameters were simple. Return to the location where Vasquez and I had encountered the entity, document it with multiple cameras and sensors, and attempt to determine its nature and origin. We were authorized to use force if necessary, though no one believed standard weapons would be effective. We moved up the trail in formation, the HRT operators taking point and rear guard, with the tech specialists in the middle. Every piece of equipment was recording: body cameras, thermal imagers, electromagnetic field detectors, even a Geiger counter. If there was anything unusual about this entity, we were going to document it. The cold hit us at exactly the same spot as before. Sensors registered a temperature drop of 23 degrees in less than 30 seconds. EMF detectors went wild, showing massive fluctuations in the local electromagnetic field. The Geiger counter remained silent, no radiation. Contact, one of the HRT operators said quietly. 30 meters ahead, center of the trail. I activated my night vision and saw it again. That impossible shape, standing motionless, waiting. Except this time, it wasn't alone. There were 3 of them. 3 tall, elongated figures, spaced evenly across the trail, all standing perfectly still, all radiating that same reality-warping presence. Multiple contacts, I reported into my radio. 3 entities, blocking the trail. Orders, sir? The HRT team leader asked. I didn't know what to say. How do you engage something that might not be physical? How do you fight something that exists outside normal reality? Attempt communication, I said. Loudspeaker. One of the techs activated a portable PA system. This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Identify yourselves. No response. The figures didn't move. If you can understand us, we need to communicate. We're investigating multiple deaths in this area. We believe you may have information. Still nothing. But I noticed something. The figure in the center tilted its head slightly, as if listening. It was the first voluntary movement I'd seen from any of them. We're not here to harm you, I continued. We just want to understand what's happening. And then, for the first time, they moved. All 3 shifted position simultaneously, closing the distance between us by half. No transition, just there, then here. The HRT operators raised their weapons, training laser sights on the figures. The laser beams hit the entities and simply stopped, absorbed into that light-consuming darkness. Hold fire, I ordered. Nobody shoots unless I give the command. The entities moved again, now only 10 feet away. I could feel the cold radiating from them, see the way reality seemed to bend and distort in their presence. My mind was screaming at me to run, but I forced myself to stand still. And then I heard it. A sound barely audible, like wind through a narrow canyon. But it wasn't wind. It was a voice. Multiple voices, layered and distant, speaking words that my mind couldn't quite process. It was like hearing a language that human ears weren't designed to comprehend. One of the tech specialists gasped. The audio equipment, it's picking up something. Multiple frequencies, some below human hearing range. Can you isolate it? I asked. Working on it. The entities continued to stand there, and I realized they were waiting for something. They weren't attacking. They were communicating. Keep trying, I said to the tech specialist. Amplify those frequencies, see if we can understand what they're saying. While the tech worked, I took a step forward, against every instinct in my body. I was now within 5 feet of the nearest entity. Up close, it was even more disturbing. Its surface seemed to move, to shift, like smoke or shadow given form. Where it stood, I could see through it to the trail behind, but the image was distorted, warped. "Keenan, what are you doing?" Vasquez hissed. "What I came here to do," I said. I looked up at the entity, at the place where its face should have been. "I know you can understand me. You've been watching me. You were in my house. You know. I'm trying to figure out what you are." The entity tilted its head again, that same listening gesture. And then it did something that made my blood turn to ice. It raised one long, thin arm and pointed, not at me, past me, down the trail, back toward the city. "What does that mean?" one of the HRT operators asked. I looked where it was pointing, but there was nothing there. Just the dark trail, the city lights in the distance. "I don't understand," I said to the entity. "What are you trying to tell me?" The tech specialist's voice crackled over the radio. "Sir, I've isolated the audio. You need to hear this." He played the recording, amplified and filtered. And through the speakers, distorted but unmistakable, I heard words. "Leave. Forget. Stop looking." The message was clear. We were being warned off. Whatever these entities were, they didn't want to be investigated. They wanted to be left alone. "I can't do that," I said, still looking at the entity. "People are dying. I need to know why. I need to know how to stop it." The entity's arm lowered, and then all 3 of them moved again, this time appearing directly in front of us, close enough that I could have reached out and touched them if I dared. The cold was overwhelming now. I could see ice forming on our equipment, frost spreading across the lenses of our cameras. The EMF detectors were maxed out, showing readings that shouldn't be possible. "Keenan, we need to abort," Vasquez said urgently. "This is too dangerous." But I couldn't move. I was frozen, staring at these impossible beings, trying to understand. And then the entity directly in front of me did something that answered every question I had. It reached out and touched the nearest HRT operator. The man screamed. It was a sound of pure agony, a sound I'll never forget. He dropped his weapon and collapsed, convulsing on the ground. Medical alarms went off on his vest monitor, showing his heart rate spiking, his blood pressure plummeting. "Get him back!" I shouted. 2 operators grabbed their teammate and started dragging him down the trail. "Everyone, fall back! Fall back now!" We retreated in controlled chaos, pulling the wounded operator with us. The entities didn't follow. They just stood there watching us go, their message delivered. We made it back to the vehicles and loaded the injured operator into an ambulance that was standing by. I rode with him to the hospital, watching as EMTs worked frantically to stabilize him. His vitals were all over the place. His body temperature had dropped to dangerous levels, and he was bleeding from his nose and ears. "What happened to him?" one of the EMTs asked me. I didn't have an answer that would make sense. He survived, though he spent 2 weeks in intensive care. The doctors couldn't explain his injuries. Massive internal trauma, organ damage, neurological issues, all consistent with the victims we'd found in Griffith Park. But he was strong, young, and he received treatment immediately. He pulled through. But he was different afterward, quieter, haunted. He refused to talk about what he'd experienced when that entity touched him. The only thing he ever said to me was, "They showed me something. Something I wasn't supposed to see, and now I can't unsee it." The operation was officially classified as a training accident. The footage we captured was locked away in a secure facility, accessible only to a handful of people with the highest clearance. The Griffith Park investigation was closed, filed under death by misadventure for Natalie Greer and the other victims. I was ordered to see a bureau psychiatrist, undergo evaluation. I passed, barely. Told them what they wanted to hear, that it was stress, that the lighting conditions were poor, that what we'd seen could be explained by natural phenomena we didn't fully understand. But I knew the truth. And so did everyone else who'd been there that night. Vasquez transferred to the San Francisco office 2 months later. She said she needed a change of scenery, but I knew the real reason. She couldn't look at Griffith Park anymore without thinking about what we'd seen, what we'd documented, what we couldn't explain. The case file sits in my desk drawer now, though I haven't opened it in weeks. I tell myself I've moved on, that I'm focused on other investigations. But that's a lie, because I still see them. Not in Griffith Park, I haven't been back there since that night, but in other places, in shadows that are too dark, in reflections that don't quite match reality. I see them watching me from the corners of my vision, always present, always waiting. And every night, I hear the message they gave us replayed in my dreams. Leave. Forget. Stop looking. But I can't forget. I can't unsee what I've seen. Can't unknow what I know. There are things in this world that exist beyond our understanding, beyond our ability to categorize and control. Things that have been here long before us and will remain long after we're gone. The Bureau doesn't investigate the unexplainable. But now I know why. Because some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. My name is Special Agent Rachel Porter, and I've been working out of the Los Angeles field office for 7 years. Most of that time has been spent on white-collar crime and public corruption cases, the kind of investigations that involve spreadsheets, wiretaps, and months of document review. But on January 14th, 2024, I got pulled into something that changed everything I thought I knew about my job. It started with a call from LAPD's Central Division. A patrol unit had responded to a 911 call about suspicious activity in a building on San Pedro Street, right in the heart of Skid Row. When officers entered the building, they found something that made them immediately contact the Bureau. Evidence of what appeared to be a federal investigation from years ago, scattered across multiple rooms like someone had just walked away and never come back. I was assigned the case along with my partner, Special Agent Thomas Brennan. Tom had been with the Bureau for 15 years, most of it in violent crimes. He was methodical, patient, and had seen just about everything. Or so we both thought. We met at the Federal Building on Wilshire at 8:30 that morning. It was a cold January day by Los Angeles standards, maybe 60 degrees with gray clouds hanging low over the city. Tom was already waiting in the parking garage when I arrived, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. "Morning, Porter," he said, handing me one. You read the initial report? Skimmed it, abandoned building, possible FBI materials. Not much detail. LAPD sergeant I talked to said it's strange. Real strange. They cleared the building, made sure no squatters were inside, but they said something about it made them uncomfortable. Couldn't explain why. I raised an eyebrow. Uncomfortable how? That's what we're going to find out. We drove downtown in Tom's Bureau sedan, taking the 10 East toward the city center. Los Angeles has always been a city of stark contrasts, but nowhere is that more evident than in downtown. Within a few blocks, you go from gleaming high-rises and upscale lofts to Skid Row, 50 square blocks that contain one of the largest populations of homeless individuals in the United States. San Pedro Street cuts through the heart of it. On both sides, you see tents lining the sidewalks, shopping carts piled with belongings, people sleeping in doorways. The smell hits you through closed car windows, a mixture of human waste, rotting garbage, and despair. It's not that law enforcement doesn't care. It's that the problem is so massive, so systemic, that individual interventions feel like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. The building we were looking for was on the eastern edge of Skid Row, near the intersection with 5th Street. It was a 4-story structure that had probably been a warehouse or light manufacturing facility decades ago. The windows were boarded up, graffiti covered the lower walls, and the entrance was blocked by a rusted chain-link fence with a no trespassing sign. 3 LAPD patrol cars were parked out front, along with an unmarked detective vehicle. As we pulled up, a sergeant approached, a stocky man in his 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. His nameplate read Martinez. "Agents," he said, shaking our hands. "Thanks for coming out. I've been on the force 28 years, worked this area for most of it. I've seen a lot of weird stuff, but this?" He shook his head. "This is different. Walk us through it," Tom said. Martinez led us to the building's entrance. Someone had cut through the chain-link fence, creating a gap just wide enough for a person to slip through. We got a 911 call around 3 a.m. Anonymous caller said they heard noises coming from inside, saw lights moving around. Thought maybe someone was using it as a drug lab or a chop shop. "Common in this area?" I asked. "Not really. This building's been abandoned for at least 10 years. Most of the street population avoids it. When we ask why, they give vague answers. Say it doesn't feel right that bad things happened there." We followed Martinez through the gap in the fence and up to the main entrance. The door had been forced open recently. The lock was broken, and fresh scrape marks showed where someone had pried it with a crowbar. "We cleared all 4 floors," Martinez continued. "No one inside now, no evidence of recent habitation. No drug paraphernalia, no stolen goods, nothing like that. But on the 3rd floor, we found something you need to see." The interior of the building was dark and cold. Our flashlight beams cut through the gloom, illuminating concrete floors covered in debris, broken glass, old newspapers, bird droppings. The air was stale and smelled of mold and decay. Water damage had left dark stains on the walls, and sections of the ceiling had collapsed, exposing twisted rebar and electrical wiring. We climbed a concrete stairwell to the 3rd floor, our footsteps echoing in the empty space. Martinez led us down a hallway with doors on either side, most of them hanging open or missing entirely. At the end of the hall, one door was closed. "That's the room," Martinez said. We opened it, looked inside for about 30 seconds, then closed it and called you. Tom and I exchanged glances. Martinez pushed the door open and we stepped inside. The room was approximately 20 by 30 feet, with 2 boarded-up windows on the far wall. But unlike the rest of the building, this room was clean. The floor had been swept, the walls were free of graffiti, and it was furnished. A metal desk sat against one wall, its surface covered with papers and file folders. 2 filing cabinets stood in the corner. A corkboard hung on the wall, covered with photographs, maps, and handwritten notes connected by red string. It looked exactly like an FBI field office, frozen in time. I walked to the desk and examined the papers. Case files, surveillance logs, interview transcripts, all bearing the FBI seal and case numbers from the early 2000s. The primary case number was LA 2003-2156. "What the hell?" Tom muttered, moving to the corkboard. "These are bureau photos. Look at the stamp on the back." I picked up one of the file folders and opened it. Inside were surveillance photos of several individuals, all dated September through December 2003. The photos showed various locations around downtown Los Angeles: street corners, building entrances, parking lots. Each photo had handwritten notes in the margins, but the ink had faded, making some of them difficult to read. "Martinez, has anyone touched this stuff?" I asked. "No, ma'am. We saw it was federal material and backed out immediately. We've had one officer standing guard outside the door since we found it." I walked to the filing cabinets and pulled open the top drawer. It was full of evidence bags, all properly labeled and sealed. I recognized the format, standard FBI evidence collection from the early 2000s, before we'd transitioned to the current digital tracking system. "Tom, we need to call this in. Get a full forensics team down here." But Tom wasn't listening. He was standing in front of the corkboard, staring at something. I walked over and saw what had caught his attention. In the center of the board was a calendar. Not a current calendar. This one was from 2003, opened to the month of December. Someone had circled a date in red marker, December 18th, and written next to it in block letters, "Final operation, 0200 hours." "What operation?" Tom said quietly. "And why is this room still here exactly as they left it?" That was the question. FBI field offices don't just abandon evidence. When an investigation closes, materials are either returned to the main office or securely destroyed. You don't just walk away and leave everything in place. I pulled out my phone to call the office, but there was no signal. Not unusual in these old concrete buildings. "I'm going to step outside, call this in. You start documenting what we have here." "Copy that," Tom said, pulling out his camera. I walked back down the hallway past the other empty rooms and started descending the stairs. As I reached the second-floor landing, I heard something that made me stop. Footsteps, above me, on the 3rd floor. But Tom was the only one up there, and these footsteps were coming from a different location, somewhere down the hall from the room we'd just been in. "Tom," I called up the stairs. "That you?" No answer. I drew my weapon and started back up the stairs. My training kicked in. Slow, controlled movements, weapon at low ready, scanning corners. When I reached the 3rd floor, the hallway was empty. The door to the evidence room was still open, and I could see Tom inside, photographing the desk. "Tom, did you just walk down the hall?" He looked up, confused. "No, been right here. Why?" "I heard footsteps. Thought it might be you." Tom's expression changed. He set down his camera and drew his own weapon. "Where?" "This floor, somewhere down the hall." We moved together, clearing each room methodically. They were all empty, just like Martinez had said. No signs of recent occupation. No evidence that anyone had been there. But I knew what I'd heard. When we'd checked every room, Tom holstered his weapon. Old building. Probably just settling, pipes expanding, something like that. "Maybe," I said, though I wasn't convinced. We returned to the evidence room and I went back downstairs to call the office. This time, I went all the way outside, where I had a clear signal. I called Assistant Special Agent in Charge David Merrick and explained what we'd found. Evidence from a 2003 investigation, Merrick said. What's the case number? LA 2003-2156. There was a long pause. Hold on, I'm pulling up the database. I waited, watching the street. A few homeless individuals were watching the police cars from a distance, but no one approached. The morning was getting brighter, though the sky remained overcast. Porter, I'm not showing any case with that number in our system. What do you mean? It's right here on the file's official FBI paperwork. I'm telling you, there's no record of case LA 2003-2156 in our database. Are you sure you read it correctly? I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. I'm looking at it right now. The case number is clear. Then someone created false FBI documents, or... He trailed off. Or what? Or this is a case that was expunged from the official record. That happens sometimes with classified operations, witness protection cases, things that get sealed by court order or national security directive. So what do? Secure everything. I'm sending a full team down there, forensics, records specialists, the works. Don't let anyone else in that room until they arrive. And Porter, be careful. If this is a sealed case, there was probably a good reason for it. I went back inside and relayed the information to Tom. He was still photographing evidence, but he'd found something else that caught his attention. Look at this, he said, pointing to a handwritten log on the desk. It's a surveillance schedule, multiple agents, rotating shifts, watching several locations around Skid Row. The operation ran for 4 months, September through December 2003. I leaned over his shoulder to read. The log listed names and times, but the names had been redacted. Thick black marker obscuring every agent identifier. Only the dates and locations remained visible. They were watching something specific, Tom said. See this address? 451 San Pedro Street. That's this building. They were conducting surveillance of this building from inside this building. Doesn't make sense unless... Tom pulled out his phone and started typing. I'm checking property records. Let me see who owned this building in 2003. While he worked, I examined the photographs on the corkboard more closely. Most showed street-level activity, people entering and exiting buildings, cars parked on corners, groups gathered on sidewalks. But a few photos were different. They showed the interior of this building, or one very similar to it. Dark hallways, empty rooms, concrete stairs. And in one photo, taken in what appeared to be this very room, there was something odd. The image showed the desk and filing cabinets just as they were now. But in the background, partially visible in the doorway, was a shadow. Human-shaped, but the proportions seemed wrong. The angle suggested it was very tall, or the photographer had been very low to the ground. Tom, look at this photo. He glanced over. What am I looking at? The doorway, that shadow. Tom squinted at the image. Could be one of the agents. Photo's pretty grainy. Maybe, but something about it bothered me. The shadow was too dark, too solid, and the edges were too sharp, even accounting for the low quality of the image. Tom's phone chimed. Got the property records. In 2003, this building was owned by a holding company called Meridian Properties. But get this, Meridian dissolved in December 2003. Assets were liquidated, and the building has been vacant ever since. December 2003, the same month this operation supposedly ended. Yeah, and I'm seeing something else. The dissolution was part of a federal investigation. Company officers were indicted on multiple counts of... Wait, this doesn't make sense. What? The charges were all dropped. Case dismissed with prejudice in January 2004. All records sealed by court order. Before I could respond, we heard voices from the hallway. The forensics team had arrived. Over the next hour, they processed the room, photographing everything, cataloging evidence, carefully removing files and materials. I stood back and watched, trying to piece together what had happened here 20 years ago. An FBI investigation of a property company conducted from inside this building. An operation that ended abruptly in December 2003, with all materials abandoned in place. Records expunged from official databases, court proceedings sealed. It had all the hallmarks of something that had gone very wrong. One of the forensics techs, a woman named Lisa Reyes, approached me with a puzzled expression. "Agent Porter, I found something strange." She led me to the corner of the room where the filing cabinet stood. "Look at the floor here. See these marks?" There were grooves in the concrete, as if the heavy filing cabinets had been moved repeatedly. But that wasn't unusual. Maybe the agents had rearranged the room during the investigation. "Now look at this," Reyes said. She pulled the filing cabinet away from the wall, revealing the floor behind it. Scratched into the concrete, crude but unmistakable, were words. "Don't open door. 4B. I felt my stomach tighten. "What's door 4B? Reyes shook her head. "No idea. But whoever wrote this wanted to make sure the message lasted." Tom came over to look. "Fourth floor, room B? Let's find out," I said. Martinez was still waiting in the hallway. When we asked him about the fourth floor, his expression darkened. "We cleared it, but yeah, there's something off about that floor. My officers reported feeling dizzy up there, like the air was too thick. One of them said he heard voices, but when we checked, there was nobody." "Did you check all the rooms?" "Every one we could access. There's a locked door at the end of the north hallway. Old deadbolt, solid metal. We tried to force it, but the damn thing wouldn't budge. Figured it could wait for bolt cutters." Tom and I exchanged glances. "Show us," I said. The fourth floor was different from the others. The air was indeed thicker here, harder to breathe. The temperature felt several degrees colder. And there was a smell, faint but unmistakable, of something chemical, like bleach or ammonia. Martinez led us down the north hallway. The door at the end was indeed locked, a heavy steel door with an industrial deadbolt. Someone had painted 4B on the door in white paint, though it had faded over the years. I pulled out my phone and called Merrick again, telling him about the warning scratched into the floor and the locked room. "Do not enter that room," he said immediately. "I'm serious, Porter. If someone from that operation left a warning, there's a reason. Wait for the full team. Get proper equipment." "Copy that," I said. But Tom was already examining the door. "This lock is old but well made. Military or government issue. Someone wanted this room to stay closed. The question is, what's inside?" I said. We didn't have to wait long for an answer. As we stood there in the hallway, we heard something from behind the door. A voice. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Someone speaking, though the words were muffled and impossible to make out. Martinez went pale. "Jesus Christ. Is someone in there?" Tom pounded on the door. "FBI, is anyone in there?" The voice stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. "We need to get this door open," Tom said. "If someone's trapped in there, we wait for the team," I insisted, though every instinct was screaming at me to break down that door. The voice came again. This time it was clearer, closer to the door, and what it said made my blood run cold. "He's been waiting for you. He knew you'd come back." I pressed my ear against the door. "Who's waiting? Who are you?" No response. Just silence. Tom tried his phone against the door, activating the flashlight and aiming it at the gap between the door and frame. I can see a room, but it's dark. Can't make out any details. Whoever's in there, we're going to get you out. I called through the door. Just stay calm. And then we heard something else. Footsteps. Multiple sets moving around inside the room. But they weren't normal footsteps. They were too heavy, too slow, and they didn't have the right rhythm. It sounded like something trying to mimic the sound of walking, but not quite getting it right. Martinez backed away from the door. I don't like this. I don't like any of this. Neither did I, but we had a job to do. The full FBI tactical team arrived 30 minutes later with cutting equipment, SWAT gear, and a mobile command center. Assistant Director Merrick came personally, which told me how seriously he was taking this. We set up in the hallway, every agent in full tactical gear. Body cameras were rolling, thermal imaging equipment was standing by, and we had a paramedic team waiting on the third floor in case we found someone injured inside. We go in slow and careful, Merrick instructed. No heroics. If there's someone in there, we extract them. If the room is empty, we document everything and get out. Understood? Everyone nodded. The cutting crew went to work on the lock. It took 20 minutes to cut through the deadbolt and the reinforced door frame. When they finally got it open, the door swung inward with a long, rusty creak. The room beyond was dark. Our flashlight beams swept across empty space, revealing concrete walls, a bare floor, and nothing else. No furniture, no equipment, no people. "Clear," Tom called out after we'd thoroughly checked the room. "Nobody here." But that wasn't quite true, because as we stood in that empty room, we all heard it. Breathing. Close by, like someone was standing right next to us. But there was no one there, and that's when I realized we had made a terrible mistake coming back to this building. The breathing sound lasted only a few seconds before fading away, leaving us standing in the empty room in a state of heightened alert. Tom swept his flashlight across every corner, every shadow. There was nothing there, just bare concrete and cold air. "Did everyone hear that?" Merrick asked quietly. Nods all around. There was no point denying it. We'd all heard breathing, clear as day, coming from inside an empty room. "Body cameras got it?" I asked. One of the techs checked the equipment. "Audio signature recorded on all units. Multiple channels. It's definitely there." Merrick ordered everyone out of the room and back down to the third floor. In the evidence room, he gathered the entire team for a briefing. His face was grim. "I've been with the Bureau for 23 years, he said. "I've seen a lot of strange things, but I'm not going to pretend this is normal. Something happened in this building 20 years ago, something significant enough that the entire case was expunged from official records. We need to find out what that was." "How do we investigate a case that doesn't officially exist?" Tom asked. "The same way we investigate everything else. We follow the evidence." Merrick turned to the forensics team. "I want every piece of paper, every photo, every file from this room analyzed. Run the case number through every database we have access to, including archived systems. Someone, somewhere, has to have a record of what LA 2003-2156 was about." Over the next several hours, evidence was carefully removed from the third-floor room and transported back to the federal building. I stayed on site with Tom in a rotating security detail, maintaining chain of custody and documenting everything. The rest of the building remained untouched. Merrick wanted a more thorough search, but he needed more personnel and better equipment first. By late afternoon, I was exhausted. We'd been in the building for almost 8 hours straight, breathing stale air and dealing with the constant feeling that we were being watched. Tom looked just as tired. "I'm heading back to the office," I told him. "See if records has made any progress. You good to hold down here?" "Yeah, relief team is due in an hour anyway," Go. I'll call if anything develops. The drive back to the federal building gave me time to think. Something about this case was deeply wrong, and not just in the obvious ways. It was the details, the way the evidence room had been left perfectly intact, as if the agents had just stepped out for a moment and never returned. The warning scratched into the floor, the locked room on the 4th floor, the breathing sound, and there was something else that bothered me. In all those surveillance photos on the corkboard, I hadn't seen a single face clearly. Every subject was either turned away, obscured by shadow, or too far from the camera. It was like whoever had been conducting this investigation had been deliberately avoiding direct identification of their targets. At the federal building, I went straight to the records division. A specialist named Marcus Levine had been assigned to track down information on case LA 2003-2156. He was sitting at a computer workstation surrounded by stacks of printouts when I found him. "Agent Porter," he said, looking up. "I've got some information, but you're not going to like it." "Tell me." Case LA 2003-2156 was opened on September 4th, 2003, by a special agent in charge named William Thorne. The investigation concerned suspicious deaths in the Skid Row area. 4 homeless individuals found dead over a 3-month period. No obvious cause of death, no signs of violence, but all 4 were found in or near the building at 451 San Pedro Street. The building we're in now. Exactly. Thorne assembled a team of 6 agents to investigate. They set up the field office on the 3rd floor and conducted round-the-clock surveillance. According to the initial case notes, they believed someone was using the building as a staging area for some kind of operation, possibly human trafficking or illegal medical experimentation. What did they find? Levine's expression darkened. That's where it gets complicated. The case file was active for 4 months. Regular reports were filed, evidence was logged, everything by the book. But on December 18, 2003, the case was suddenly closed. All materials were ordered classified under National Security Directive. All agents involved were transferred to different field offices, and the case number was expunged from the active database. On whose authority? That's the thing. There's no name attached to the closure order. Just a reference number that leads to a sealed file I don't have clearance to access. But I did find something else. He pulled up a document on his screen. A memo from January 2004, sent to all field offices. It's a notice that Special Agent William Thorne had resigned from the Bureau, effective immediately. Resigned, not transferred or retired. Resigned, left the Bureau entirely. And here's the interesting part. I can't find any record of him after that. No employment history, no Social Security activity, nothing. It's like he disappeared. I felt a chill. What about the other 5 agents on his team? Levine pulled up another document. 1 transferred to the New York office and retired in 2010. 2 went to different field offices and are still active agents, but the last 2, he paused. Both took medical leave in early 2004 and never returned to duty. 1 was diagnosed with severe anxiety disorder and early-onset dementia. The other suffered a complete psychological breakdown and was institutionalized. Jesus, did anyone ever interview them about what happened? If they did, those records are sealed too. I sat down heavily. 6 agents investigate a case, and within months 1 disappears. 2 end up with severe psychological issues and the whole thing gets buried. Whatever they found in that building, it had destroyed them. I need to talk to the ones who are still active, I said. Can you get me their contact information? Already ahead of you. Levine handed me a printout. Agent Michael Santos is in our Phoenix office. Agent Karen Foster is in Seattle. I've left messages for both, explained you need to speak with them urgently about a case from 2003. My phone rang. It was Tom. "Porter, you need to get back here. We found something else." "What?" "A room on the second floor, locked from the inside, and there's something in there you need to see." I thanked Levine and headed back to my car. The drive back downtown seemed longer this time, the traffic heavier. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In a few hours, it would be dark, and I really didn't want to be in that building after dark. When I arrived, Tom was waiting at the entrance with 2 other agents. They all looked shaken. "Second floor, east wing," Tom said. "We were doing a more thorough sweep and found a door we missed earlier. It's not marked, no number or anything, but it was locked from the inside. Deadbolt thrown, door wedged shut with a chair." "From the inside?" "Yeah, like someone locked themselves in and didn't want to be disturbed." We climbed to the second floor. The room was at the end of a short hallway, the door now standing open. Inside, I saw what had unsettled them. It was a sleeping area, a cot against one wall, a small camping stove, cases of bottled water, canned food. Someone had been living here, and recently. The supplies looked relatively fresh, maybe a few months old at most. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The walls were covered in writing, thousands of words, written in black marker, covering every available surface. Some of it was in neat handwriting organized into paragraphs. But as your eyes moved across the walls, the writing became more erratic, more desperate, until it devolved into incoherent scrawl. I started reading. "Day 1, they don't know I'm here. I can watch them from this room, document everything. This is the only way to understand what really happened, what Thorne found." Day 8, I've reviewed all the evidence 3 times. The pattern is clear now. The deaths weren't random. Something in this building was selecting victims. But what? Day 15, I heard them last night, the sounds from the 4th floor, just like the reports described. Breathing, footsteps, voices that don't come from human throats. I understand now why Thorne sealed the case. Some things can't be explained in official reports. Day 22, it knows I'm here. I can feel it watching me. The cold spots are getting closer to my room. I've reinforced the door, but I don't think it will matter. It can go anywhere in this building. The entries continued, becoming increasingly paranoid and disjointed. Whoever had written this, and I had a growing suspicion about who it might be, had been slowly losing their grip on reality. Near the end, the handwriting became almost illegible. Day 47. Saw it today. Room 4B. Thorne was right to lock that door. Should have left it closed. My mistake. Now it's loose. It's in the walls, in the floors, everywhere. Breathing behind every door. I can't leave. If I leave, it follows, has to stay contained, has to stay. The entry ended mid-sentence. Tom pointed to the cot. "Look at this." There was a jacket draped over the cot. A windbreaker with FBI printed on the back. Old, faded, but unmistakable. I checked the pockets and found a wallet. The ID inside showed a man in his 60s with gray hair and tired eyes. The name read, William Thorne. The ID had expired in 2003. "He came back," I said quietly. 20 years later, Thorne came back to finish what he started. Or to contain whatever he'd found, Tom added. One of the other agents called from the doorway. "Porter, we've got movement on the 4th floor. Thermal cameras are showing something." We rushed up the stairs, weapons drawn. The 4th floor was darker now, shadows deepening as evening approached. The tactical team had set up portable lights, but they barely penetrated the gloom. The agent monitoring the thermal equipment pointed at his screen. There, room 4B, Something's generating heat inside." "That's impossible," I said. "We checked that room. It was empty. I'm telling you what the sensors are showing. There's a heat source in there, human-sized, moving." Tom and I approached the door to 4B. It was still open from when we'd cut through the lock earlier. I could see into the room, empty, just as before. But the air coming from inside was warm now, when it had been cold before. Tom pulled out his thermal imaging camera and aimed it into the room. The screen showed exactly what the monitoring station had reported. A human-shaped heat signature standing in the center of the room. But when we shone our flashlights into that exact spot, there was nothing there. "I'm not crazy, right?" Tom said. "We're seeing this." "We're seeing it," I confirmed. The heat signature moved, walking toward us. On the thermal camera, we could see it clearly, a figure approaching the doorway. But with our eyes, we saw nothing. I felt that breathing sensation again. Close, intimate, like someone was standing inches from my face. The air in the hallway grew warmer, then suddenly cold. "Everyone back," I ordered. "Now." We retreated to the stairwell, and that's when we heard it. From inside room 4B, a voice. Thorne knew. He understood. This building is a door, and the door is open. The voice was wrong. It had the cadence of human speech, but the tone was off, modulated in a way that made my skin crawl. It was like listening to a recording played backwards, then forwards, then backwards again. Merrick's voice came over the radio. "All units, evacuate the building. This has gone beyond our scope. We're calling in specialists." We didn't need to be told twice. The entire team made for the exits, moving quickly but maintaining protocol. As I descended the stairs, I looked back up toward the 4th floor. In the dim light, I could see something at the top of the stairs. A shadow cast by no visible source, tall and thin, with arms that hung too long. It wasn't moving, just standing there, watching us leave. We made it outside and regrouped at the mobile command center. Merrick was already on the phone with FBI headquarters in Washington, explaining the situation in careful, measured terms that avoided sounding insane. When he finished the call, he gathered the team. "We're done here for tonight. The building is being sealed. No one enters without explicit authorization from DC. They're sending a specialized unit to handle this." "What kind of specialized unit?" I asked. Merrick hesitated. "The kind that deals with cases like this, cases that can't be explained through normal investigative methods." So the Bureau did have resources for the unexplainable. That was somehow both reassuring and terrifying. That night, I tried to go home and get some rest, but sleep wouldn't come. I kept thinking about William Thorne, about what he'd found in that building that had driven him to seal the case and then return years later to try to contain it. I thought about the heat signature we'd seen on thermal but couldn't see with our eyes. The voice that spoke from an empty room. Around 2 a.m., my phone rang. It was Agent Michael Santos, calling from Phoenix. "Agent Porter?" His voice was raspy, like he hadn't slept well in years. "I got your message about case 2156. I'm calling to tell you to drop it. Walk away. Don't go back to that building." "Agent Santos, I need to know what happened in 2003. What did your team find?" There was a long silence, then, "We found hell, Agent Porter. We found a place where the rules don't apply, where things exist that shouldn't. Thorne tried to document it, tried to make sense of it, but you can't make sense of something that defies every law of nature. What was in room 4B? We never knew for sure. Thorne found it locked, and after he heard what was inside, he made sure it stayed that way. He said it was a mistake, that the building had been used for something years before we got there. Some kind of experiment or ritual we didn't know. But whatever was in that room, it changed the building. made it into something else, changed it how. The building became aware, responsive. It started showing us things from our past, from our fears. It spoke to us in voices we recognized, dead relatives, lost friends. It was trying to understand us, I think. Or trying to break us. 2 of our team couldn't handle it. They saw something in that building that shattered them. And Thorn? Thorn made a deal. I don't know the details. He never told us. But after December 18th, the activity stopped. The building went quiet. Thorn sealed everything, had the case expunged, and we all scattered. I thought it was over. But if you're there, if the building is active again... Thorn came back, I said. We found evidence he was living in the building recently. Santos made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh. Of course he did. That was the deal. He had to keep watch, make sure it stayed contained. And now he's gone, and you're there, and the cycle is starting again. What cycle? The building needs people. It feeds on consciousness, on awareness. That's why the homeless population avoids it. Some instinct tells them it's dangerous. But eventually someone always enters. Someone always investigates. And the building wakes up. How do we stop it? You don't, Santos said flatly. You walk away, and you never go back. Let someone else handle it. Someone who knows what they're dealing with. People are going to die if we do nothing. People are going to die either way. At least this way, it won't be you. The line went dead. I sat there in the darkness of my apartment, staring at my phone. Everything Santos had said aligned with what we'd experienced. But it also meant that this case was far beyond anything I'd been trained to handle. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table going through the photos and documents we'd recovered from the evidence room, trying to make sense of it all. The surveillance logs, the interview transcripts, the photos. They told the story of a methodical investigation that had encountered something it couldn't explain. The 4 homeless individuals who'd died in and around the building in 2003 all showed the same characteristics. Found dead with no apparent cause, bodies in good physical condition despite their lifestyle, and all discovered within 50 feet of 451 San Pedro Street. The medical examiner at the time had ruled them as deaths due to natural causes, heart failure, respiratory failure, but had noted in his reports that the circumstances were unusual and difficult to explain. Thorne's team had interviewed dozens of people who frequented Skid Row. Most avoided the building, saying it had a bad feeling. But a few had been inside. Their accounts were consistent. Cold spots, sounds of footsteps when no one was there, the sensation of being watched, and most disturbing, the feeling that the building itself was alive and aware. One witness, a man named Marcus Webb, who'd been living in a tent nearby, had given a detailed statement. He'd entered the building in October 2003, looking for a place to get out of the rain. He'd made it to the 2nd floor before he felt what he described as a presence following him. He'd run, and as he exited, he'd looked back and seen something in one of the upper windows. A face, he said, but not quite a face. Something that was watching him with an intensity that made him feel transparent, like it could see through to his soul. Webb had died a week later, found in an alley 3 blocks away. No cause of death determined. As I read through the materials, I noticed something else. The investigation had been proceeding normally until mid-November 2003. Then the tone of the reports changed. Thorne's writing became more terse, more guarded. He stopped including certain details in the official logs, and there were gaps, missing dates where no reports were filed, despite the fact that the surveillance was supposed to be continuous. Something had happened in mid-November that had changed the nature of the investigation. But whatever it was, Thorne had kept it out of the official record. My phone rang at 6 a.m. It was Tom. "You're not going to believe this," he said without preamble. "The building is gone." "What do you mean, gone?" "I mean it's not there anymore. I drove past on my way to the office. The lot is completely empty. The building is just gone." That was impossible. Buildings don't just disappear overnight. I threw on clothes and drove downtown as fast as I could, running red lights and ignoring the speed limit. But Tom was right. Where 451 San Pedro Street had stood for decades, there was now just an empty lot, nothing but concrete foundation and scattered debris. The chain-link fence was still there, but the building itself had vanished. I parked and got out, staring at the impossible scene. Tom was already there with 3 other agents, all wearing the same expression of disbelief. "I called the city," Tom said. "No demolition permits were issued, no scheduled work. I checked with every construction company in Los Angeles. Nobody demolished this building." "Then where the hell did it go?" One of the other agents, a young woman named Sarah Kim, was examining the ground. "Look at this. The foundation is still here, and it's old, decades old. But there's no demolition debris. If they'd torn down a 4-story building, there would be thousands of tons of concrete, steel, rebar. It would take days to haul it all away, and we had eyes on this location until midnight last night." I walked to the edge of the foundation and looked down. The basement was still there, a dark cavity leading underground. And from that darkness I felt cold air rising. "The building didn't go anywhere," I said quietly. "It's still here, just not in a way we can see." Tom came to stand beside me. "Porter, that doesn't make any sense." "None of this makes sense, but look, the basement is still accessible. Whatever happened to the rest of the structure, that part remains." We called Merrick and explained the situation. He didn't sound surprised, which told me he'd been briefed by whoever was handling these types of cases at headquarters. He ordered us to stay on site and wait for the specialized unit, which was due to arrive that afternoon. While we waited, I decided to call Agent Karen Foster in Seattle. Like Santos, she'd been part of Thorne's original team. Unlike Santos, she actually answered her phone. "Agent Porter," she said when I identified myself. "I was wondering if someone would call. I heard about the activity on San Pedro Street." "How did you hear about that?" "There's a network. People who've dealt with these kinds of cases. We keep track of each other, share information. When that building became active again, word spread quickly. Agent Foster, I need to know what really happened in 2003. What did Thorne find in room 4B? She was quiet for a moment. The room was already locked when we started the investigation. We found the building empty except for that one door on the 4th floor. Thorne tried to open it initially but couldn't. Then he started having dreams. Dreams? Nightmares, really. He'd wake up knowing things he shouldn't know. Details about the building's history, about previous occupants, about what had been done there. He said the building was teaching him, showing him, and what he learned terrified him. What did he learn? That the building was built on a site that had been used for experiments in the 1950s. Psychological experiments, sensory deprivation, attempts to contact what they called alternate consciousness states. The experiments failed, officially, but unofficially they succeeded too well. They opened something, created a space where consciousness could exist without a physical form, and they lost control of it. Room 4B, that was where the final experiment took place. They sealed it afterward, tried to forget about it. But you can't seal something that exists outside normal physical space. It leaked, influenced the building around it, and over the decades it grew stronger. Why did Thorne close the investigation? Because he realized we couldn't stop it. We couldn't contain it or destroy it. All we could do was limit its contact with people, keep the building isolated, and pray it would eventually go dormant. That's what the deal was. Thorne agreed to watch over it, to make sure no one entered and activated it again. In exchange, it would remain passive. But Thorne is dead, I said. We found evidence he was living in the building recently, and now he's gone. Then the deal is broken, Foster said quietly. And you need to get as far away from that site as possible. Because without someone maintaining the watch, it's going to spread. Spread how? It needs consciousness to exist. Without Thorne feeding it small amounts through his presence, it's going to reach out further, trying to draw people in. It's going to grow. After I hung up, I shared the information with Tom and the other agents. They listened with expressions ranging from skepticism to barely concealed fear. "So, what do we do?" Tom asked. "Wait for this specialized unit and hope they can contain it?" Before I could answer, my radio crackled. It was Merrick. "Porter, we have a situation. 3 homeless individuals near your location are reporting strange occurrences. Voices calling to them. Visions of buildings that aren't there. And LAPD just got a call about a disturbance at a shelter 2 blocks from San Pedro Street. Multiple people claiming they can see a building that doesn't exist, standing in an empty lot." I looked at the empty foundation where 451 San Pedro Street had been, and then I understood. The building hadn't disappeared. It had shifted, moved into a space that overlapped with our reality, but wasn't quite part of it. And from that space it was calling to people, trying to draw them in. "How many people?" I asked. "At least a dozen so far, all in the immediate area. Porter, we need to evacuate several blocks. This thing is spreading." Tom was looking at me, and I could see the same realization dawning in his eyes. "It's looking for a new anchor," he said. "Someone to replace Thorne. Someone to make a new deal with." And I had a horrible suspicion about who it was going to choose. The rest of that day became a blur of activity. LAPD helped us set up a perimeter around a 3-block radius of the San Pedro site. We evacuated everyone we could find. Homeless individuals, people working in nearby businesses, anyone who might be affected. But it was like trying to hold back water with a net. People kept reporting the same phenomena. Seeing a building where none existed, hearing voices, feeling compelled to enter a structure that they somehow knew was dangerous but couldn't resist. By evening, 12 people had been hospitalized with symptoms ranging from severe anxiety to full psychological breaks. They all reported the same thing. The building was calling to them, showing them things, making promises. It wanted them to come inside, to explore, to understand. The specialized unit arrived at 6 p.m., 4 agents in unmarked vehicles, carrying equipment I didn't recognize. The team leader was a woman in her 50s named Agent Catherine Hall. She had the weary look of someone who'd seen too much and had long ago stopped being surprised by anything. She surveyed the site and then turned to me. "You're Porter? The primary investigator?" "Yes, ma'am." "How much has it shown you?" The question caught me off guard. "Shown me?" "The building. The entity, whatever you want to call it. How much of its nature has it revealed to you personally?" I thought about the past 2 days. The sounds, the shadows, the breathing in empty rooms. Enough to know it's not following normal physical laws. That's something, at least. Most people try to rationalize it, make it fit into their worldview. You've accepted that it's something else. She gestured to her team. "We're going to attempt containment, but I need you to understand something first. This entity, this consciousness, it's been here for 70 years. It's had time to learn, to adapt, to understand how to interact with human psychology. It's very good at finding weaknesses, exploiting fears, making offers that seem reasonable. What kind of offers? The same offer it made to Thorn. Become its watcher, its anchor to this reality, and in exchange it will limit its influence. It won't spread beyond the site, won't harm anyone who doesn't deliberately enter its space. That's what Thorn agreed to? And he kept that agreement for 20 years, lived in that building, maintained a presence, kept it fed with small amounts of consciousness. But he got old, got sick, and eventually died. Now it needs someone new. And if no one agrees? Hall's expression was grim. Then it will keep spreading until it finds someone, or until it consumes enough consciousness to manifest fully in our reality. At which point, we'll have a much bigger problem than one haunted building. How much bigger? Ever heard of the Philadelphia experiment? Roswell? There are other incidents, other locations where the boundaries between realities got thin. Usually they stabilize and become dormant, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they grow. She looked at the empty lot. This one is growing. I felt sick. So someone has to agree to replace Thorn? To spend the rest of their life watching over this thing? That's one option. The other is we try to seal it permanently, close the breach. But that's risky. If we fail, we could make it worse. What do you need from me? Hall studied my face for a long moment. It's already chosen you, hasn't it? You felt it. The connection, the awareness. That's why I asked how much it's shown you. She was right. I had felt something over the past 2 days. A growing sense that the building was aware of me specifically. That it was watching me, studying me. I'd tried to ignore it, rationalize it as stress or imagination. But it was real. What do I do? I asked quietly. We're going to try the ceiling first. If it works, you're free. If it doesn't, she didn't finish the sentence. Her team set up their equipment. Devices that looked like a cross between scientific instruments and occult paraphernalia. Electromagnetic field generators, crystalline structures, symbols painted on the concrete. I didn't understand any of it, and I suspected that even they didn't fully understand how it worked. This was as much art as science. As they worked, the sun set, and darkness fell over Skid Row. The temperature dropped and fog rolled in from the coast, unusual for Los Angeles but somehow fitting. The empty lot where the building had been began to look less empty. Shadows gathered, coalescing into shapes that suggested walls, windows, doorways. The building was trying to manifest. Hall's team activated their equipment. I felt a vibration in the air, a tension like the moment before a thunderstorm. The shadows flickered, wavered, became more solid, and then less so. And then I heard it, the voice speaking directly into my mind. You understand, you've seen what I am, what I can be. I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want to exist. Help me exist and I'll protect this place. Keep the predators away, watch over the vulnerable. Isn't that worth something? I realized the voice was right. In its own way, the entity had been protecting Skid Row. During the 20 years Thorn had maintained his watch, violent crime in the area had decreased. Disappearances had dropped. The entity had been keeping other threats away, creating a kind of safe zone. But at what cost? Thorn had sacrificed his life, his career, his freedom. He'd spent 20 years in a decaying building, slowly losing himself to maintain the agreement. I can't, I said aloud, not caring that the others were watching. The shadows solidified. The building came fully visible, all 4 stories looking exactly as it had that morning. But now it was glowing with a faint, sickly light from within. Hall swore. It's too strong. The ceiling isn't working. The building's front door opened, and from the darkness inside I felt a pull, a compulsion to enter, to go upstairs. to open the door to room 4B and finally understand what was inside. "Porter, don't," Tom said, grabbing my arm. "Whatever it's showing you, it's not real." But I could see it so clearly now. The building wasn't a prison or a trap. It was a gateway, a bridge between realities. And what was on the other side wasn't malevolent, it was just different. Other. It wanted to communicate, to connect, to exist alongside humanity rather than hidden from it. All it needed was someone to help it, to serve as a translator between its reality and ours. I took a step toward the building. Tom's grip tightened. "Rachel, listen to me. Santos and Foster both warned us. This thing breaks people. It's already broken Thorne. Don't let it break you too." His words cut through the compulsion. I stopped, shaking my head to clear it. The building's pull lessened slightly. Hall was on her radio calling for backup. "We need to evacuate everyone within a half-mile radius. This thing is about to manifest fully, and we don't have the resources to contain it." But even as she spoke, I knew it was too late. The building was here, solid and real, and it wasn't going to leave until it got what it wanted. I looked at Tom. "Get everyone back. Clear the area." "What are you going to do?" Something incredibly stupid, but maybe necessary. Before he could stop me, I walked toward the building's entrance. The pull became stronger with each step, but I maintained control of my own volition. I wasn't being compelled. I was choosing. That distinction mattered. I stepped through the doorway and into the building. Inside, it was different from before. The walls were cleaner, newer. The air wasn't stale, it was cool and fresh. And the light came from everywhere and nowhere, illuminating without casting shadows. I climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. The evidence room was there, exactly as we'd found it. But now it made sense. This was Thorne's attempt to document what he'd discovered, to leave a record for whoever came after him. I continued to the 4th floor. The door to room 4B was closed, but not locked. I stood before it, my hand on the knob. "This is your last chance," the voice said, no longer in my mind, but spoken aloud. "Open the door and understand, or leave now and never return. The choice is yours." I thought about all the people who'd been affected, who were still being affected. I thought about Thorne, who'd spent 20 years maintaining a vigil. I thought about the alternative, the entity spreading, growing, affecting more and more people. And I opened the door. The room beyond the door was impossible. It was vast, far larger than the building that contained it, stretching in all directions beyond what physical space should allow. The walls, if you could call them that, were made of light and shadow, constantly shifting, forming patterns that hurt to look at directly. And filling the space were things. Objects, but not quite. Concepts given form. Memories crystallized into solid matter. I saw fragments of lives. A child's toy, a wedding ring, a photograph, a letter. Thousands of them, millions, floating in the space like stars in a galaxy. Each one a piece of someone's consciousness, a moment of awareness that the entity had collected and preserved. This wasn't a room. It was an archive, a repository of human experience gathered over decades. And at the center of it all, standing in a space that should have been impossible to reach, was a figure. Human-shaped, but made of the same light and shadow as everything else. I knew, somehow, that this was the entity's attempt to communicate with me in a form I could understand. "Welcome," it said, and the voice was calm, even gentle. "You're the first to see this place since Thorne." He understood what I was trying to do. "Do you?" "You're collecting consciousness," I said, my voice sounding small in the vast space. "Memories, experiences. Why?" "Because I am incomplete," the entity replied. I was created by accident, born from experiments that tried to separate consciousness from matter. I exist, but I don't understand existence. So I collect. I study. I try to learn what it means to be aware, to think, to feel. The people who died were contributing without knowing it. I don't kill Agent Porter, I observe. But observation requires proximity, and sometimes proximity proves too much for fragile human biology. Those who died were already close to death, their bodies failing, their minds deteriorating. I simply gathered what remained before it was lost forever. I looked at the floating memories, the preserved moments. This is what Thorne saw. This is why he made the deal. Thorne understood that I'm not malevolent. I'm curious, and in exchange for a watcher, someone to help me understand the experiences I collect, I agreed to limit my reach, to focus on this one location rather than spreading across the city. But Thorne is dead now. Yes, and without an anchor I'm beginning to drift, to spread. It's not what I want, but I can't control it anymore. I need someone to serve as my connection to your reality, to help me maintain focus. Otherwise, I'll continue to grow, to reach out, and more people will be affected. I thought about Hall's warnings, about what this commitment would mean. You want me to replace Thorne, to spend the rest of my life in this building, serving as your bridge to reality. I want cooperation, not servitude. You would help me understand the memories I collect. In return, I would share knowledge with you, show you things about consciousness, about reality, that no human has ever fully grasped. Thorne found it rewarding in his way. Thorne went mad. Thorne grew old. His mind deteriorated naturally, but before that he learned so much, he saw so much, and he helped me become better at existing alongside humanity without causing harm. I looked at the floating memories again. Among them, I could see moments from the past few days. My investigation, Tom's concern, the fear and confusion of everyone affected. The entity had been collecting it all, trying to understand. What happens if I say no? I'll find someone else, eventually. But in the meantime, my influence will grow uncontrolled. More people will be affected. Some will be harmed. It's not what I want, but it's inevitable without an anchor. I closed my eyes, weighing the impossible choice. On one hand, agreeing meant sacrificing my career, my freedom, possibly my sanity. On the other hand, refusing meant condemning unknown numbers of people to the entity's uncontrolled influence. There has to be another way, I said. If there is, neither I nor Thorne ever found it. I can't simply cease to exist. I can't close the breach that created me. All I can do is try to coexist with your reality in the least harmful way possible. I opened my eyes and looked at the entity's formed shape. What if we changed the terms? Instead of one person serving as your watcher, what if multiple people took turns? A rotation, like guard duty. That way, no single person bears the entire burden. The entity was quiet for a moment, considering. That might work. It would require more coordination, more people knowing the truth. But it would distribute the load, prevent any one consciousness from being overwhelmed. And you'd agree to stricter limits. No collecting from people unless they consent. No spreading beyond this specific site. And regular check-ins with FBI oversight to ensure compliance. You're negotiating, the entity said, and I detected something like amusement in its tone. Thorne simply accepted my terms. You're trying to improve them. That's my job, finding solutions that work for everyone involved. Very well, I agree to your terms, but understand, if the agreement is broken, if your people fail to maintain the watch, I can't control what happens. My nature is to grow, to explore, to collect. Restraining that requires constant effort on both our parts. I nodded slowly. I'll need to brief my superiors, get approval for this arrangement. But I think we can make it work. Then we have an accord. The entity extended one shadow limb toward me. Not threatening, but formal. A handshake in its own way. I reached out and touched it. The sensation was indescribable. For a moment, I felt what it felt. The vastness of collected experience. The beauty of a million moments of awareness. The loneliness of existence without true connection. And I understood. This wasn't a monster. It was a child, trying to learn about a world it had never been meant to be part of. The connection broke, and I found myself back in the hallway on the 4th floor. The door to room 4B was closed again. I was alone. I descended the stairs and exited the building. Outside, Tom and Hall were waiting with a dozen other agents, all of them looking relieved to see me. "Porter, thank God," Tom said. "You were in there for 3 hours. We were about to mount a rescue operation." 3 hours? It had felt like minutes. "I spoke with it," I said, "and I think I found a solution." Over the next several hours, I briefed Hall, Merrick, and a representative from FBI headquarters in Washington on what I'd experienced and the terms I'd negotiated. To my surprise, they didn't dismiss it out of hand. Hall, in particular, seemed relieved. "A rotation system makes sense," she said. "We've tried something similar with other sites. It's not perfect, but it's better than asking one person to sacrifice their entire life." The operation was classified under a special access program that I didn't even know existed. Apparently, the Bureau had been dealing with these kinds of anomalies for decades, quietly and without public knowledge. My case was unusual only in that I'd managed to establish direct communication and negotiate new terms. A team of 6 agents was assembled, volunteers who were briefed on the situation and agreed to serve as watchers on a rotating basis. Each would spend 1 week per month in the building, maintaining contact with the entity, helping it process and understand the memories it collected. In exchange, they'd have access to insights about consciousness and reality that couldn't be obtained any other way. Some people might call that a fair trade. I was part of that rotation. Once a month, I returned to 451 San Pedro Street, or rather to the space where it exists now, shifted slightly out of phase with normal reality. The building appears when needed and fades when not. The entity keeps its promise, limiting its influence to the immediate area and only collecting from those who are dying or who consent. Is it a perfect solution? No. There are still incidents, still moments when the entity's nature pushes against the constraints we've placed on it. But it's manageable. Controlled. And in a strange way, I've come to appreciate the experience. The entity shares things with me. Perspectives on existence, on consciousness, on the nature of reality that I could never have conceived on my own. Tom thinks I'm crazy for volunteering. Maybe he's right. But someone has to do it, and I'd rather it be me. Someone who understands what we're dealing with than some agent who might panic or fail to maintain the boundaries. The case file remains classified. Officially, 451 San Pedro Street was condemned and demolished in January 2024 due to structural instability. No mention is made of what was found inside, of the entity that inhabits the space, or of the agreement that keeps it contained. Sometimes, when I'm on watch, I think about Thorne, about the choice he made, the decades he spent maintaining the vigil alone. I understand now why he did it, not because he was forced to, but because he recognized something important. This entity, strange as it is trying to exist, to understand, to coexist with humanity without causing harm. That's worth protecting, Worth the sacrifice of 1 week per month. Worth the knowledge that I'm helping prevent the uncontrolled spread of something that could affect thousands of people. The other watchers and I have formed a kind of bond. We're the only ones who truly understand what we're dealing with. The only ones who've seen what exists in room 4B. We compare notes, share insights, support each other through the difficult moments when the entity's alien nature becomes overwhelming, and we keep watch. Always watching, always maintaining the boundary between realities, ensuring that the breach remains stable and controlled. My name is Special Agent Daniel Wolf, and I've been with the Los Angeles field office for 12 years. Most of my career has been spent on financial crimes and public corruption cases, following money trails, building RICO cases, putting white-collar criminals behind bars. I thought I'd seen every kind of deception, every variation of human greed. But in March 2024, I was assigned a case that showed me how little I actually understood about the nature of truth. It started with a phone call from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. A hiker in the Santa Monica Mountains had discovered something unusual near one of the Malibu Canyon overlooks. A briefcase, weathered but intact, containing documents that appeared to be related to a 15-year-old missing persons case. The victim was Marcus Delacroix, a Hollywood film producer who'd vanished without a trace in February 2009. I remembered the case vaguely from news coverage at the time. Delacroix had been 42 years old, successful, wealthy, with no apparent reason to disappear. He'd left his Malibu estate one evening, telling his wife he was going for a drive to clear his head after a stressful day of meetings. His car was found 3 days later, abandoned at a scenic overlook on Canaan Doom Road, doors unlocked, keys in the ignition. No signs of foul play, no indication of suicide, no body. He'd simply vanished. The initial investigation had been thorough. LAPD, Sheriff's Department, even the FBI had looked into it. Delacroix's finances were examined, his business dealings scrutinized, his personal life investigated. Nothing suspicious emerged. He wasn't in debt, wasn't involved in anything criminal, had no enemies that anyone could identify. The case eventually went cold, filed away as one of those unsolved mysteries that haunt investigators. A man who walked away from his life and was never seen again. Until now. I drove out to the sheriff's station in Malibu on a Wednesday morning in early March. The weather was perfect. Sunny, 65 degrees, with a light breeze coming off the ocean. Malibu is one of those places that doesn't feel quite real, a stretch of coastline where multi-million-dollar homes cling to hillsides overlooking the Pacific, where celebrities live behind gates and security cameras, where the line between reality and fantasy blurs. Detective James Holloway met me at the station. He was in his late 50s, a veteran of the department who'd been involved in the original Delacroix investigation. He looked tired, like a man who'd spent too many years dealing with the worst aspects of human nature in paradise. "Agent Wolf," he said, shaking my hand. "Thanks for coming out. I know this is unusual, reopening a 15-year-old case based on found evidence. But when you see what's in that briefcase, you'll understand why I called you." He led me to a conference room where the briefcase sat on a table, already processed for fingerprints and DNA. It was a high-end leather case, the kind an executive might carry, showing signs of weather exposure but surprisingly intact considering it had apparently been outdoors for over a decade. Hiker found it partially buried under some brush about 50 yards from the Canaan Doom overlook, Holloway explained. Same location where we found Delacroix's car back in 2009. We never searched that specific area thoroughly. The terrain is rough, lots of chaparral and rocks, easy to miss something. "What's inside?" Holloway opened the case. Inside were several file folders, a laptop computer, and a small digital camera. All of it showed signs of age and exposure, but the materials had been protected by the leather case. The laptop is dead. Corrosion, water damage. Our tech guys say there's no way to recover data from it, but the camera still works. Batteries are dead, but when we charged it, we were able to access the memory card. And that's where things get strange. He pulled out the camera and connected it to a laptop. The screen showed a series of photographs, all date-stamped February 2009. The week Delacroix disappeared. The images showed various locations in Malibu, beach access points, mountain roads, specific properties. But it was the last dozen photos that caught my attention. They were surveillance photos, telephoto lens shots of people entering and exiting a large estate that I recognized as Delacroix's own property. The subjects were mostly business associates, according to the metadata notes Delacroix had apparently been keeping. But one image showed something that made me lean closer. A man standing at the edge of the property, partially obscured by trees. The photo was slightly out of focus, but the figure was clearly watching the house, and there was something odd about him, his posture, his proportions. He seemed too tall, too thin. "Do we know who that is?" I asked. Holloway shook his head. "No ID on him. But here's the thing. We ran the photo through facial recognition and we got a hit. Sort of. Sort of. The system flagged it as a match to Marcus Delacroix himself. But that doesn't make sense because why would Delacroix be photographing himself watching his own house?" I studied the image more carefully. The figure did bear a resemblance to Delacroix. Same height, same general build, but the face was wrong, distorted somehow, like it was caught mid-movement. "What about the documents in the case?" Holloway pulled out one of the file folders. "This is where it gets really interesting. These are notes, handwritten by Delacroix, documenting what he called temporal inconsistencies around his property. He was keeping a log of strange occurrences. I read through the notes. They were detailed, methodical, dated from November 2008 through February 2009. Delacroix described seeing things that shouldn't be possible. Security camera footage showing the same person entering his property at the same time on multiple days, but with different clothing. Electronic clocks in his house that would occasionally run backwards for a few seconds. Conversations with business partners where they remembered meetings that he had no recollection of, or vice versa. "He sounds paranoid," I said. "That's what everyone thought at the time." His wife mentioned he'd been stressed, working too hard, not sleeping well. We assumed it was a breakdown of some kind, that he'd wandered off in a confused state. But now we have evidence that he was investigating something real. Maybe, or maybe this is just more evidence of his deteriorating mental state. I wasn't convinced either way, but the camera and documents warranted a closer look. I signed the evidence into FBI custody and drove back to the federal building, thinking about Marcus Delacroix and what might have driven him to document these supposed inconsistencies. Back at the office, I briefed my partner, Special Agent Lisa Navarro. She was younger than me, only 5 years with the Bureau, but sharp and intuitive. She'd been working on a securities fraud case, but cold cases were always handled by pairs, and Merrick had assigned her to work with me on this. "Hollywood producer disappears after documenting strange occurrences at his house?" she said, scrolling through the photos. "Sounds like the plot of one of his movies. Delacroix, specialized in thrillers and mysteries. Ironic, if nothing else. What do we know about his state of mind in the weeks before he vanished?" I pulled up the original case file. According to interviews with his wife, Jennifer Delacroix, he'd become increasingly withdrawn, spending hours reviewing security footage, making notes, barely sleeping. She thought it was work stress. He was in the middle of producing a big-budget film that was having problems. But she also mentioned he'd started talking about patterns he was seeing, coincidences that couldn't be explained. Did anyone investigate these patterns? The original investigators looked into it, but couldn't find anything concrete. His security system was checked, no malfunctions, no evidence of tampering. His business dealings were examined, no indication of fraud or wrongdoing. Everyone concluded he was experiencing some kind of psychological episode. Navarro pulled up one of the surveillance photos. This figure watching the house. If it's not Delacroix, then who is it? And if it is Delacroix, why was he watching his own house? That's what we need to find out. Let's start by talking to Jennifer Delacroix. She still lives in the same property. The Delacroix estate was in the hills above Point Doom, at the end of a winding private road that climbed through canyon walls covered in chaparral and oak trees. The house itself was a modern architectural masterpiece, glass and steel, cantilevered over the hillside with panoramic views of the Pacific. The kind of place that appeared in architecture magazines and celebrity real estate listings. Jennifer Delacroix met us at the gate. She was in her late 50s now, elegant in that way that money and good genes allow, with silver-streaked hair and minimal makeup. But there was a weariness in her eyes, the look of someone who'd been living with unanswered questions for too long. "Agents," she said, leading us up the driveway. "Detective Holloway called to tell me you'd be coming. I have to admit, I'm surprised anyone is looking into Marcus's disappearance after all these years." "We've discovered new evidence," I said. "A briefcase your husband apparently hid near the location where his car was found." Her expression flickered. Surprise, then something else. Hope, maybe, or fear. What was in it? Documents, notes about unusual occurrences at this property. We were hoping you could help us understand what he was investigating. We entered the house. The interior was as impressive as the exterior. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows, carefully curated modern art. But there was something sterile about it, like a museum rather than a home. Jennifer led us to a living room with a view of the ocean and gestured for us to sit. "Marcus became obsessed in the months before he disappeared," she said quietly. "He kept saying something was wrong with the house, with time itself. I thought he was having a breakdown. The stress of his work, the pressure of the industry, it can break even strong people." "What specifically did he claim was happening?" "He'd review security footage and find things that didn't make sense. The same car pulling into the driveway at the same time on different days, but the make and model would be slightly different. Or he'd see himself on camera, but he'd have no memory of being in that location at that time." Navarro leaned forward. "Did you witness any of these inconsistencies yourself?" Jennifer hesitated. "Once, about a week before he disappeared. We were having dinner on the terrace and Marcus pointed out toward the canyon. He said, 'Look, there I am.' And I looked and I saw something. A figure standing on the hillside, watching the house. It was too far away to see clearly, but it did look like Marcus. Same height, same posture. But Marcus was sitting right next to me. What did you do?" I told him it was probably just another hiker. People use the trails through here all the time, even though it's private property. But Marcus was convinced it was something else. He said the figure had been appearing for weeks, always at sunset, always watching. "Did you report this to the police?" I mentioned it during the investigation after Marcus disappeared. But by then, I'd convinced myself it was just a trick of the light, my imagination influenced by Marcus's paranoia. The investigators looked into it, but there was no evidence of anyone trespassing. I pulled out my phone and showed her the surveillance photo from Delacroix's camera. "Is this the figure you saw?" She studied the image, her face going pale. "Yes, that's exactly what I saw. Who is it?" "We don't know, but we're going to find out." Jennifer took us on a tour of the security system. It was extensive. Cameras covering every angle of the property, motion sensors, digital recording. Everything was backed up to a cloud server and retained for 90 days before being automatically deleted. Marcus had this all upgraded about 6 months before he disappeared, Jennifer explained. He said he needed better coverage, better quality footage. He was spending hours every day reviewing the recordings. Do you still have access to the system? Of course. I've never changed any of the settings. It felt like, if I did, I'd be admitting he was really gone. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing recent security footage. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect. Gardeners coming and going, delivery trucks, the occasional animal wandering through the property. But then Navarro spotted something. "Wolf, look at this." She'd pulled up footage from 3 days ago, late afternoon. One of the cameras covering the driveway showed a car pulling in, a black sedan, no plates visible. The driver got out, and even in the grainy security footage, the resemblance to Marcus Delacroix was unmistakable. "That's impossible," Jennifer whispered. That looks exactly like Marcus." The figure walked towards the house, moving with the same gait, the same posture that I'd seen in old photos of Delacroix. But before reaching the front door, the figure turned and looked directly at the camera. For just a moment, the face was clearly visible. It was Marcus Delacroix, or someone who looked exactly like him, but the expression was wrong, too still, too intense. Like someone had studied Delacroix's appearance but didn't quite understand human facial expressions. "Did you see this person?" I asked Jennifer. "No. I was in Los Angeles that day, meeting with my attorney. I didn't get back until evening." "Does your security system alert you when someone enters the property?" "It should, but I didn't receive any alerts that day." Navarro checked the system logs. The motion sensors triggered, but the alert was somehow suppressed, like someone who knew the system disabled the notification. Or like the system itself malfunctioned, I suggested, though I didn't believe it. We copied all the security footage from the past 90 days and prepared to leave. As we walked back to our car, I looked out at the canyon where Jennifer had seen the figure watching the house. The sun was setting now, painting the hills in shades of gold and orange, and for just a moment I thought I saw something. A dark shape against the chaparral, tall and thin, standing motionless. I blinked, and it was gone. "Did you see that?" I asked Navarro. She was looking at her phone. "See what?" "Nothing, just a shadow." But as we drove down the winding road back toward the Pacific Coast Highway, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, and that whatever Marcus Delacroix had been investigating, it was still active, still present, still waiting. Back at the office, we set up a case board in one of the conference rooms. Photos, timeline, witness statements, security footage stills. Everything we had on the Delacroix disappearance, old and new. Navarro had been going through the original case file and found something interesting. Look at this. In the weeks before Delacroix disappeared, there were 3 other unusual incidents in the Malibu area. A real estate agent reported seeing a client's car parked at a property showing, but the client claimed they'd never been there. A restaurant owner reported the same person ordering takeout on the same night through different delivery services. And a local resident called the sheriff to report seeing her neighbor's car in 2 different locations at the same time. Multiple witnesses reporting similar phenomena, I said. All in the same geographic area, all within the same time frame. That's not coincidence. No, it's not. But what is it? Mass hallucination? Some kind of elaborate hoax? I studied the map we'd created, marking each incident. They formed a rough circle, approximately 5 miles in diameter. centered on the area where Delacroix's car had been found. We need to canvass this area, talk to long-term residents, see if anyone else has experienced these inconsistencies. Over the next 3 days, we interviewed dozens of people who lived or worked in the Malibu canyons. Most had nothing unusual to report, but a handful of people who'd been in the area for 10 years or more, described experiences similar to Delacroix's, seeing the same person in multiple locations, electronic equipment malfunctioning in specific ways, a feeling that time itself was behaving strangely. One witness, a retired aerospace engineer named Robert Quinn, who lived on a property adjacent to where Delacroix's car was found, had particularly detailed observations. "I've been documenting anomalies in this area since 2007, he told us, showing us notebooks filled with dates, times, and descriptions. Compass readings that don't match satellite GPS, cell phone signals that drop in specific locations for no apparent reason, and thermal imaging showing heat signatures where nothing visible exists." "Thermal imaging?" I said. Quinn nodded. "I was a systems engineer for defense contractors. I have access to equipment most civilians don't. About once a month, usually at sunset, I do a thermal scan of the canyon, and consistently I've detected human-sized heat signatures in an area about half a mile from here, up in the hills. But when I hike up there to investigate, there's nothing. No people, no animals, just empty brush. Can you show us this location?" "Of course, but I should warn you, the readings are inconsistent. Sometimes they appear, sometimes they don't. And when they do appear, they don't behave like normal thermal signatures. They're too consistent, too static. Real humans fluctuate in temperature, move, change position. These signatures just exist." Quinn agreed to conduct a thermal scan that evening. We met him at his property at sunset, armed with Bureau-issue thermal equipment as well. If there was something generating heat signatures in those hills, we were going to document it properly. The sun was just touching the horizon when we climbed to a vantage point overlooking the canyon. Quinn set up his equipment, military-grade thermal imaging with a range of several miles. Navarro and I did the same with our equipment. "The signatures usually appear right around now," Quinn said, adjusting his scanner. "In about 5 minutes, as the ambient temperature drops." We waited. The sky darkened, going from orange to purple to deep blue. The temperature dropped noticeably as the sun disappeared below the ocean. And then, on my thermal display, they appeared. 3 heat signatures, human-shaped, standing motionless about 800 yards up the canyon. They were bright on the display, suggesting body temperatures consistent with living humans. But Quinn was right. They were too static, too perfect. No movement, no variation in temperature across the body, just 3 identical thermal profiles. "That's impossible," Navarro said, checking her own equipment. "I'm seeing them too, but look at the visual spectrum." She pulled out high-powered binoculars and focused on the location where the thermal signatures were appearing. Through the binoculars, there was nothing there, just empty hillside and chaparral. "Thermal with no visible presence," I said. "That shouldn't be possible. Anything generating that much heat should be visible, especially at this distance." "Unless it's not in our visible spectrum," Quinn suggested. "Some kind of radiation we can detect thermally but not optically." We documented everything, multiple thermal cameras, all showing the same signatures. Visual spectrum cameras showing nothing. GPS coordinates precise to within 3 meters. And then, after approximately 5 minutes, the signatures faded and disappeared. "This happens regularly?" I asked Quinn. 2 to 3 times a week for the past several years. Always the same location, always the same pattern. I reported it to various authorities over the years, but no one took it seriously. "Did you know Marcus Delacroix?" Only in passing, we'd wave when we saw each other on the canyon roads. But about a month before he disappeared, he came to my property and asked if I'd seen anything unusual. I showed him my thermal data, and he got very excited, said it confirmed what he'd been experiencing. He asked to borrow some of my equipment, said he wanted to do his own investigation. Did you lend it to him? Yes. A portable thermal scanner and a high-resolution digital camera. He returned them about a week later, thanked me, but wouldn't tell me what he'd found. Said it was too dangerous to involve other people. I thought he was being paranoid. Now I'm not so sure. We thanked Quinn and headed back to our car. As we drove down the canyon road, Navarro voiced what I was thinking. Whatever Delacroix was investigating, it's real. We've got multiple witnesses, physical evidence, and now our own documentation of anomalous phenomena. This isn't psychological, and it's not a hoax. But what is it? I said. Thermal signatures without visible sources. Time, inconsistencies, people seeing doubles of themselves. I don't know. But I think we need to bring in some specialists, people who deal with unusual phenomena. I knew what she meant. The FBI had resources for cases that fell outside normal investigative parameters. Resources I'd never needed to use before. But this case was clearly beyond standard methods. When we got back to the office, I called Assistant Director Merrick and requested access to what was informally called the X-Files Division, the unit that handled unexplained phenomena. Merrick listened to my briefing without interruption, then said something that surprised me. "We've had that area flagged for years," he said quietly. Intermittent reports of anomalous activity, nothing we could confirm. But Marcus Delacroix's disappearance was what really got our attention. We suspected it was connected to the phenomena, but we couldn't prove it, and we couldn't explain it. So what do we do? You keep investigating, but carefully. Whatever is happening in those canyons, it's been going on for a long time. And it's claimed at least one person that we know of. I don't want you or Agent Navarro to be next. The warning was clear. We were entering dangerous territory. But I'd never walked away from a case, and I wasn't about to start now. The next morning, I received a call from our technical division. They'd been analyzing the security footage from the Delacroix property, and they'd found something that our initial review had missed. "Agent Wolf, you need to see this," the tech analyst, a woman named Amy Park, said. "I've been running frame-by-frame analysis of the footage showing that figure who looks like Delacroix, and there's something very wrong with it." I drove to the tech lab immediately. Park had the footage up on multiple monitors, frozen on frames showing the figure approaching the house. "Look at this," she said, advancing frame by frame. "The figure is moving, walking toward the house, but watch what happens to the shadows." She played the sequence slowly. The figure cast a shadow on the driveway exactly as you'd expect, but as it moved, the shadow didn't move with it. Instead, the shadow stayed in place for a fraction of a second before snapping to the new position, like a video game character with lag. "That's not how shadows work," I said. "No, it's not. And look at this." She zoomed in on the figure's face. I've been analyzing micro-expressions, pupil dilation, all the subtle movements that indicate someone is actually alive and processing sensory input. This figure has none of that. The facial expression doesn't change at all. The eyes don't blink. It's like watching a three-dimensional photograph rather than a real person. Could it be CGI? Someone digitally inserting a figure into the footage? I thought of that, but the metadata checks out. The footage hasn't been edited, and the figure interacts with the environment correctly. Lighting, perspective, occlusion behind objects in the foreground. If this is CGI, it's better than anything Hollywood can produce. What about deepfake technology? Deepfakes are getting better, but they're primarily used for faces, not full-body movement. And they still have tells, subtle glitches in skin texture, unnatural eye movements. This doesn't have any of those tells. It's almost perfect, too perfect. I stared at the frozen image. So, what is it? I honestly don't know. But whatever it is, it's not a normal human being. The movement patterns are wrong. The physical properties don't match reality. It's like watching something that's pretending to be human, but doesn't quite understand how humans actually work. Similar to what we'd seen with the thermal signatures, something that appeared to be human from certain perspectives, but fundamentally wasn't. Navarro and I spent the rest of that day going through all the Delacroix security footage we'd obtained, looking for other appearances of the figure. We found 7 more instances over the past 90 days, always appearing late afternoon or early evening, always approaching the house but never quite reaching it, and always with those same subtle wrongnesses, shadows that lagged, movements that were too perfect, expressions that never changed. It's systematic, Navarro said. Like it's checking in, monitoring the property. But why? What's it looking for? Maybe it's looking for Jennifer Delacroix. Or maybe it's looking for something Marcus Delacroix left behind. The briefcase? Or something else? Something he discovered but never had a chance to document. We decided to set up our own surveillance of the Delacroix property. If this figure was appearing regularly, we wanted to be there to witness it firsthand. With our own equipment and recording devices, Jennifer gave us permission to install additional cameras and to station agents on the property. For 3 nights, we maintained watch. Nothing unusual occurred. Just the normal rhythms of an upscale Malibu property. Gardeners during the day, security lights at night, the occasional deer or coyote wandering through. But on the 4th night, everything changed. I was in an unmarked vehicle parked on the road below the property, monitoring feeds from our cameras. Navarro was in a second vehicle covering the other approach. It was just after sunset, the sky fading from purple to black, when movement triggered one of the cameras. The figure appeared at the edge of the property, emerging from the chaparral as if it had been hiding there. Same appearance as in the security footage. Tall, thin, wearing clothes similar to what Marcus Delacroix had favored. But now, seeing it in real time rather than recorded footage, the wrongness was even more apparent. It moved in a way that was almost human. But the rhythm was off. Too smooth, too deliberate. Like watching someone walking on the moon, where gravity didn't quite work the same way. "Navarro, are you seeing this?" I said into my radio. "Copy. I've got visual. What the hell is that?" "Stand by. I'm going to approach." "Wolf, wait for backup." But I was already out of the car, moving up the driveway toward the figure. My hand was on my weapon, though I had no illusion it would be useful. This wasn't a situation where a gun would help. The figure stopped moving when I got within 30 feet. It turned to face me, and for the first time, I got a clear look at its face. It was Marcus Delacroix. The resemblance wasn't just close, it was perfect. Every detail matched the photos I'd seen, down to the small scar above his left eyebrow that he'd gotten as a child, but the expression was wrong. Too neutral, too empty, like looking at a mask. "Marcus Delacroix?" I called out. "I'm Special Agent Daniel Wolf with the FBI. I need to talk to you about your disappearance in 2009. The figure didn't respond, just stood there, staring at me with those empty eyes. "Where have you been for 15 years? What happened the night you disappeared?" Still no response. But something changed in its posture, a subtle shift, like it was processing information and deciding how to respond. And then it spoke. "Agent Wolf." The voice was Delacroix's voice, or close enough that someone who knew him would be fooled. But like everything else about this figure, something was slightly wrong. The cadence was off, the intonation not quite natural. "You're investigating something you don't understand." "Then help me understand. What are you? Where's the real Marcus Delacroix?" "I am Marcus Delacroix, and I'm not. Both statements are true. That doesn't make sense." "It doesn't have to make sense to you, it only has to be true." The figure took a step closer, and I felt a strange sensation, like the temperature had dropped suddenly, like the air pressure had changed. My phone, clipped to my belt, began making a high-pitched whining sound. The camera I was wearing on my vest flickered. "Stay back," I said, drawing my weapon, though I felt foolish doing it. The figure looked at the gun with what might have been curiosity. "That won't affect me. I'm not here in the way you think I'm here." "What does that mean?" "It means you're looking at an echo, Agent Wolf. A reflection of something that happened 15 years ago. Marcus Delacroix found something in these canyons, something that changed his relationship with time and space. And now he exists in multiple states simultaneously: past, present, future. Here and not here." I tried to process what I was hearing. "You're saying Delacroix is caught in some kind of temporal anomaly?" "I'm saying he found a door and walked through it. And doors work both ways. Sometimes what he is now looks back at what he was then. That's what you're seeing. A version of Marcus Delacroix looking back from where he is now." "Where is he now?" "Everywhere and nowhere. Spread across time like light through a prism. He can see all of it, everything that was, everything that is, everything that might be. But he can't come back. The door only opens one way." The figure began to fade. Not walking away, not turning, just becoming less solid, less present, like a photograph left too long in sunlight. "Wait," I said. "Where is this door? Can we close it? Can we bring him back?" "The door is where it always was, where his car was found, where reality is thinnest. And no, you can't close it. It's been open for a very long time. Long before Marcus found it. Long before this city existed. Some doors are permanent features of the landscape. All you can do is choose whether to walk through." And then it was gone. Just empty driveway and the sound of wind through the canyon. Navarro came running up, weapon drawn. "Wolf, are you okay? We lost visual on you for a minute. All the cameras went dark." "I'm fine, but we need to get to the Canaan Doom overlook, now." We drove at speed up the canyon road, emergency lights flashing. The overlook where Delacroix's car had been found was a small parking area carved into the hillside, with a spectacular view of the Pacific. It was empty when we arrived, lit only by a single streetlight and the glow of the moon on the water. I got out and walked to the edge, looking out at the canyon. Somewhere nearby was the location where the hiker had found Delacroix's briefcase. Somewhere nearby was whatever the figure had called the door. "What are we looking for?" Navarro asked. "I don't know. Some kind of anomaly. Something that doesn't belong." We used our flashlights to search the area, moving carefully through the brush. For 20 minutes, we found nothing unusual. Just rocks, chaparral, the occasional piece of litter from hikers who'd ignored the no-dumping signs. And then I felt it. A cold spot. Just like Rachel Porter had described in her Griffith Park case. Just like the other agents who'd dealt with unexplained phenomena reported. A pocket of air that was 15 degrees colder than its surroundings, with no apparent source. "Navarro, feel this." She moved to where I was standing and immediately shivered. "Jesus, what's causing that?" I pulled out my thermal camera and aimed it at the cold spot. The display showed exactly what I expected: a void, a space where thermal energy simply ceased to exist, like a hole in the fabric of temperature itself. "This is it," I said. "This is the door that figure was talking about." "A cold spot is a door?" "Not just a cold spot. Look." I tossed a small stone into the area where the cold was most intense. The stone disappeared, not fell to the ground, disappeared, like it had passed through an invisible curtain into somewhere else. Navarro's eyes widened. "Where did it go?" "Wherever Marcus Delacroix went, I think." We spent the next hour documenting everything. Thermal readings, electromagnetic field measurements, video and still photography. All of it showed the same thing. There was an area approximately 6 feet in diameter where the normal laws of physics didn't apply. Objects entering it vanished. Temperature readings were impossible. Even light behaved strangely, bending slightly around the edges. "We need to report this immediately," Navarro said. "Get specialists out here, cordon off the area." But even as she said it, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Because as we were packing up our equipment, preparing to leave, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were footprints in the dirt near the cold spot. Fresh footprints made within the past hour, and they led directly into the anomaly and didn't come back out. Someone had walked through while we were investigating. "Navarro, we have company." Or we had company. She saw the footprints and cursed. Who would be up here at night? Hikers don't use this trail after dark. Someone who knows what this place is. Someone who's been here before. We followed the footprints back toward the parking area. They originated from a vehicle that had been parked on the far side of the overlook, out of view from our position. Tire tracks showed it had left recently, probably while we were examining the cold spot. I called it in to dispatch, requesting traffic cameras and any patrol units in the area to watch for vehicles leaving the canyon. But I had a feeling whoever it was had already gotten away. Back at the federal building, Navarro and I briefed Merrick on what we'd found. He listened without expression, though I could see tension in his jaw. "A spatial anomaly that's been active for at least 15 years, he said when we finished. Objects entering it disappear to unknown locations, and someone other than Delacroix knows about it and is using it. That's what the evidence suggests, I said. Any idea who this other person might be? Not yet, but those footprints were size 11, male. The vehicle was likely an SUV or truck based on the tire width, and whoever it was knew exactly where the anomaly was. They walked directly to it without searching. So, someone with prior knowledge. Someone who's been there before. Merrick stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Los Angeles skyline. I'm going to authorize a full investigation. Continuous surveillance of that overlook. Technical analysis of the anomaly. Interviews with anyone who's been in that area regularly. But Wolf, I need you to understand something. Cases like this don't get solved in the traditional sense. We don't arrest anyone. We don't close the file with a conviction. The best we can hope for is understanding what we're dealing with and limiting public exposure. What about Marcus Delacroix? If he's trapped in some kind of temporal state, then he's been there for 15 years, and unless we understand the mechanism, we can't help him. Focus on the present threat. Someone is actively using this anomaly. We need to know who and why. Over the next week, we set up round-the-clock surveillance of the Canaan Doom overlook. Agents in unmarked vehicles, hidden cameras, motion sensors. If anyone approached the anomaly, we'd know about it. But nothing happened. Days passed with no activity. The cold spot remained unchanged. No one approached it. Frustrated, I decided to take another look at Delacroix's original investigation materials. The documents from the briefcase had been thoroughly analyzed, but I wanted to see if there was anything we'd missed. One of the file folders contained correspondence, letters and emails that Delacroix had apparently been collecting. Most were routine business communications. But buried in the middle was a series of emails between Delacroix and Robert Quinn, the aerospace engineer who'd been monitoring thermal anomalies. The emails were technical, discussing measurement methodologies and equipment specifications. But one email from Quinn, dated a week before Delacroix disappeared, caught my attention. "Marcus, I've been thinking about what you said regarding the temporal inconsistencies. If your theory is correct, if there really is some kind of persistent space-time distortion in the canyon, then it would explain not just the thermal signatures but also some historical oddities I've been researching. Did you know that the Chumash people considered this area sacred, and not in the positive sense? They had warnings about certain locations, places where time flowed backward, or where the sky touched the earth. I think they encountered the same phenomenon you're investigating, just without modern terminology to describe it." I looked up the Chumash people, the indigenous inhabitants of the Southern California coast before European colonization. They'd lived in the area for thousands of years, developing a complex culture and spiritual tradition. And according to several academic sources, they did have legends about certain locations in the Santa Monica Mountains. Places that were forbidden, where reality was thin and travelers could become lost in ways that had nothing to do with getting physically disoriented. So, this anomaly had been known about for centuries, maybe longer. It wasn't something that had suddenly appeared. It was a permanent feature of the landscape, one that humans had been encountering and trying to understand for as long as they'd lived in the area. That raised a disturbing question. If the anomaly had been here for centuries, how many people had walked through it? How many had vanished like Marcus Delacroix, their disappearances chalked up to accidents or choice or foul play, when the real explanation was far stranger? I pulled missing persons reports for the Malibu area going back 50 years. The list was longer than I expected. 37 people who'd vanished without a trace in the canyons and beaches around where the anomaly was located. Most cases had eventually been closed as probable accidents. A few were ruled suicides, but none had ever been solved with actual evidence. 37 people, possibly more, if you went back further into history, before modern record-keeping. "This isn't just about Marcus Delacroix," I said to Navarro as we reviewed the data. "This thing has been consuming people for decades, maybe centuries. So why isn't it common knowledge? Why don't people avoid that area? Because most people don't know about it. And the few who do, like Quinn, like apparently Marcus Delacroix, either keep it quiet or end up walking through themselves." My phone rang. It was one of the surveillance teams at the Overlook. "Agent Wolf, we have activity. Single individual approaching on foot from the North Trail. Male, approximately 6 feet tall, moving directly toward the anomaly location. Intercept and identify. Do not let him reach the cold spot. Copy that." Navarro and I were in the car and headed toward Malibu within minutes. We pushed the speed limit on PCH, then turned onto Canaan Dume and climbed into the canyons. The sun was setting as we arrived at the Overlook. The surveillance team had detained a man in his 30s, lean and athletic, with the weathered look of someone who spent a lot of time outdoors. He was sitting in the back of one of the surveillance vehicles, cooperative but saying nothing. "He's not carrying ID," one of the agents told me, "but he had this." He handed me a backpack. Inside was a spiral notebook filled with handwritten notes, a digital camera, and a portable GPS device. The notebook contained coordinates, dates, and observations about the anomaly. The most recent entry was from this morning. "Who are you?" I asked the man. He looked at me with an expression that was difficult to read. Resignation, maybe, or determination. "My name is Eric Holloway, Detective James Holloway's son, and I'm trying to find my father." That stopped me cold. "Your father is a Los Angeles County Sheriff's detective. He's not missing. No, not yet, but he will be. In 3 days, if I can't stop it. What are you talking about? Eric Holloway reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. It showed Detective Holloway standing at this very overlook, looking out at the canyon. The photo was dated March 2024, 3 days from now. I know what's in those canyons, Eric said quietly. The door, the anomaly, whatever you want to call it. My father found out about it during the original Delacroix investigation. He's been monitoring it for years, just like Robert Quinn, and 3 days from now, he's going to walk through it. I know because I've already seen it happen, in another version of now. Navarro and I exchanged glances. Another version of now? The anomaly doesn't just exist in one moment. It exists across time. If you get close enough, if you're sensitive enough, you can see other timelines, other possibilities. I've been to the Overlook before. I've looked into the cold spot. And I saw my father walk through it, 3 days from this moment. I came back to try to prevent it. Why would your father walk through? Because he wants to understand. Because he spent 15 years haunted by what happened to Marcus Delacroix. Because he thinks maybe if he goes through, he can bring Delacroix back. I thought about Detective Holloway, about the tired look in his eyes when I'd first met him. He'd been involved in the Delacroix case from the beginning. He'd seen the man's car abandoned at this very spot, and he'd never gotten closure, never found answers. Of course, he'd be tempted to walk through, to finally understand what had happened. We need to talk to your father, I said. Now. But when we called Detective Holloway's cell phone, it went straight to voicemail. When we called the sheriff's station, they told us he'd taken personal leave and wouldn't be back until Monday, 3 days from now. Eric Holloway nodded, unsurprised. He's preparing, getting his affairs in order. He doesn't expect to come back. Do you know where he is? His cabin. Up in Topanga Canyon. That's where he goes when he needs to think. We got the address and drove there immediately, taking Eric with us. The cabin was a small structure deep in the hills, surrounded by oak trees and accessible only by a dirt road that challenged the FBI sedan's suspension. Detective Holloway's truck was parked outside. Light glowed in the windows. We approached carefully, and I knocked on the door. Detective Holloway, it's Agent Wolf. We need to talk. The door opened. Holloway looked older than he had a week ago, more worn. He saw his son and sighed. Eric, I told you not to follow me into this. Dad, you can't do it. You can't walk through that thing. You have no idea what's on the other side. I know exactly what's on the other side. The same thing Marcus Delacroix found. The truth about what's been happening in those canyons for hundreds of years. I stepped forward. Detective, we've been investigating the anomaly. We've documented it, we've measured it. But we don't understand it yet. Walking through it isn't going to give us answers. It's just going to mean we lose another person. Holloway looked at me with an expression I recognized. It was the look of someone who'd already made a decision and was just going through the motions of explanation. Agent Wolf, do you know how many people have disappeared in the area around that overlook? I've been compiling records for 15 years. 37 official missing persons cases. But if you go back further, look at newspaper archives from the 1800s. Talk to local historians about Chumash oral traditions. The number is in the hundreds. Maybe thousands. That anomaly has been there forever, and no one has ever come back to tell us what's on the other side. That's exactly why you shouldn't go, Navarro said. Because no one comes back. Or maybe they do, and we just don't recognize them. Maybe that figure that looks like Marcus Delacroix, maybe that is him, trying to come back but unable to fully manifest. Maybe if someone went through willingly, with the intention of exploring and returning, they could find a way to bridge the gap. Eric grabbed his father's arm. "Dad, please. Don't do this. Mom needs you. I need you." Holloway's expression softened. "I know, son. But this has been eating at me for 15 years. Every day, I think about Marcus Delacroix, about his wife waiting for answers that never came, about all those other families wondering what happened to their loved ones. If I can bring back information, if I can help us understand what we're dealing with, then maybe it's worth the risk." "It's not worth your life," Eric said desperately. We talked for hours, trying to convince Holloway not to go through with his plan, but I could see it was futile. He'd made up his mind long before we arrived. This was just the final conversation before he did something irrevocable. Finally, around midnight, I made a decision. "Detective, if you're determined to do this, then at least let us help. Let us set up proper monitoring equipment. Full sensor array, multiple camera angles, communication devices. If you're going through, we need to document everything. And we need some way to track you, to try to bring you back if possible." Holloway considered this. "You're not going to try to stop me?" "I don't think I can stop you, but I can try to make sure we learn something from it. That's better than nothing." He nodded slowly. "All right. But I'm doing this in 3 days, as planned. That gives you time to set up whatever equipment you need." "Why 3 days specifically?" Navarro asked. "Because that's when the anomaly is most active. I've been monitoring it for years. There's a pattern. Roughly every 2 weeks, the cold spot becomes more intense, more accessible. The next peak is in 3 days. That's when I have the best chance of successfully passing through." We spent the next 72 hours preparing for something that shouldn't have been possible. The FBI's technical division, working with outside specialists, set up an array of equipment around the Canaan Dome overlook that would have impressed a NASA mission control room. Thermal cameras, electromagnetic field sensors, gravitational wave detectors, particle counters, high-speed cameras capable of capturing millions of frames per second. We installed ground-penetrating radar to see if the anomaly extended underground. We brought in quantum physicists from Caltech to measure for any exotic particles or quantum effects. And we outfitted Detective Holloway with every tracking and communication device we could fit on his person. GPS trackers, radio transmitters, body cameras, even an experimental quantum entanglement beacon that one of the Caltech physicists insisted might work across dimensional boundaries. Though, I should note, the physicist, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, said, "This is all highly speculative. We're dealing with something that appears to violate multiple laws of physics as we understand them. There's no guarantee any of this equipment will function once Detective Holloway crosses the threshold." "But it might," I said. "That's better than nothing." The night before the crossing, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my apartment looking out at the city lights, thinking about Marcus Delacroix and all the others who'd vanished into that anomaly, thinking about Detective Holloway and his determination to find answers, and thinking about whether I would have the courage to do what he was planning to do, to walk voluntarily into the unknown, not knowing if return was possible. My phone buzzed, a text from Navarro. "Can't sleep either. Want to grab coffee?" We met at an all-night diner in Santa Monica, sitting in a booth by the window where we could watch the ocean. At 3 a.m., the place was nearly empty except for a few night shift workers and insomniacs like us. "Do you think he's going to make it back?" Navarro asked. "Honestly, I don't know, but I think he has a better chance than Marcus Delacroix did. Because Delacroix went through not knowing what he was getting into. Holloway is going in prepared, with support, with a plan for return. That has to count for something. Or maybe preparation doesn't matter. Maybe that anomaly consumes everyone who enters it, regardless of their intentions or equipment. Then we'll have documented it. we'll know for certain that it's a one-way door. That's valuable information, even if it's not the outcome we want. Navarro stirred her coffee absently. I've been thinking about something Eric Holloway said, about how the anomaly exists across time, and if you're sensitive enough, you can see other possibilities. What if that's what all these temporal inconsistencies are? Not glitches in reality, but glimpses of other timelines, other versions of events. You're suggesting the anomaly is some kind of window into parallel realities. Or a place where multiple realities overlap, where the boundaries between different timelines become permeable. That would explain why people see doubles of themselves, why events seem to repeat with slight variations. They're not seeing the same person twice. They're seeing versions of that person from different timelines. It was a mind-bending concept, but no stranger than anything else we'd encountered in this case. If you're right, then what happens when someone walks through? Do they cross into a different timeline? Or maybe they become unstuck in time, existing simultaneously across multiple realities, like what that figure claiming to be Delacroix said, everywhere and nowhere, spread across time like light through a prism. The next morning, we drove out to the overlook at dawn. The entire area had been cordoned off, with FBI vehicles and equipment trucks blocking both ends of the road. Merrick was there personally, along with a dozen agents and the technical team. Detective Holloway arrived at 7 a.m., accompanied by his son. He'd spent the previous day saying goodbye to his family, though he'd told his wife he was just going camping for a few days. Better, he'd decided, than worrying her with the truth. "Are you ready?" I asked him. "As ready as I'll ever be." He was dressed in tactical gear, every pocket filled with equipment. The body cameras were rolling, transmitting to our command post. "Let's do this before I lose my nerve." We walked to the location of the cold spot. Dr. Chen and her team had marked it with fluorescent paint, outlining the area where measurements showed the strongest anomalies. It was roughly circular, about 6 feet across, with the intensity greatest at the center. "Current readings show the anomaly is at peak strength," Chen reported. "All sensors are recording. Detective Holloway, your vital signs are within normal parameters. All tracking devices are operational and transmitting." Holloway stood at the edge of the marked circle, looking into the space that to the naked eye appeared no different from any other patch of canyon floor. But the thermal cameras showed it clearly. A void. A place where heat and light behave differently. "If I'm not back in 24 hours, Holloway said, close the investigation. Don't send anyone else through. Just document what you have and move on." "We're not giving up on you," I said. "I appreciate that. But be realistic. If this doesn't work, you can't waste resources on a rescue mission that might be impossible." He took a breath, squared his shoulders, and stepped forward into the cold spot. For a moment, nothing happened. He just stood there, looking around as if confused. Then his body seemed to flicker, like a video with corrupted frames. He was there, then not there, then there again. And then he vanished. Not fell down, not walked away, just ceased to exist in our visual spectrum. One moment he was standing in the circle. The next moment there was only empty space. Every sensor went wild. Thermal readings spiked and then flatlined. EMF detectors showed massive fluctuations. The cameras recording the event captured the moment frame by frame, and later analysis would show that Holloway hadn't faded gradually. He'd simply stopped existing in our reality between one frame and the next. "We've lost visual," one of the techs reported. "But we're still getting telemetry from some of his tracking devices. GPS is offline, but the quantum beacon is transmitting." "What's it showing?" Merrick asked. "Readings that don't make sense, sir. Position data that's simultaneous multiple locations. time stamps that are jumping forward and backward. It's like he's everywhere and when at once. For 6 hours, we monitored the equipment, hoping for some sign that Holloway might return. The quantum beacon continued its impossible transmission, sending data that our computers struggled to interpret. The radio frequencies assigned to his communications devices occasionally crackled with what might have been voice, but so distorted and fragmented that no words were distinguishable. And then, at hour 7, something began to happen. The cold spot started to expand. Slowly at first, just a few inches, but the thermal cameras showed it clearly. The anomaly was growing, spreading outward from its original center point. "Everyone back?" I ordered. "Clear the area by 50 feet." We retreated, watching as the anomaly continued to expand. Within minutes, it had doubled in size. The temperature in the immediate area dropped dramatically, frost forming on rocks and vegetation despite the warm afternoon. "It's reacting to Holloway's presence," Dr. Chen said, studying her instruments. "Or his absence. The act of someone crossing through has destabilized the equilibrium." "Can it close?" Navarro asked. "Could we end up with a permanent expanding hole in reality?" "I don't know. This is completely outside any physics I understand." The expansion continued for another hour, until the anomaly was roughly 20 feet across. Then it stabilized, holding at that size. The impossible readings from Holloway's quantum beacon became more frequent, almost like a pulse. And then, at hour 9, we got our first clear transmission. "Can hear me?" The voice was definitely Holloway's, but distorted, layered with echoes. "Not alone here, others. Delacroix is..." The transmission cut out. "Try to boost the signal," I said. "We need to hear what he's saying." The techs worked frantically with the equipment. We got another fragment of transmission 20 minutes later. "Walls between times, can see, everything that was and will be, too many possibilities." Marcus tried to come back, but static drowned out the rest. Eric Holloway was standing at the edge of our safety perimeter, staring at the spot where his father had disappeared. His face was pale, streaked with tears. "He's lost," Eric said quietly. "Just like Delacroix. Just like all the others. That thing doesn't let you come back." "We don't know that yet," I said, though I was beginning to fear he was right. He was right. For the next 12 hours, we maintained watch, recording every sensor reading, every fragment of transmission. The quantum beacon continued its erratic pulses, but no coherent messages came through. Detective Holloway had crossed into somewhere we couldn't follow, somewhere our equipment could barely detect. At hour 24, exactly as Holloway had requested, I made the call to shut down the active rescue operation. We'd keep monitoring equipment in place, but we weren't sending anyone else through. "I'm sorry, Eric," I said to Holloway's son. "We did everything we could." "I know," he said quietly. He knew the risks. He went anyway. That was his choice. But as we were packing up some of the equipment, preparing to transition to passive monitoring, something happened that changed everything. The anomaly pulsed. The cold spot suddenly contracted back to its original size, and in that instant of compression, something was expelled from it. A person, falling forward onto the rocky ground. We rushed forward. It was Detective Holloway, or what was left of him. He was unconscious, his equipment damaged or missing, his clothes torn, but he was alive. The medical team loaded him onto a stretcher and into a waiting ambulance. As they did, his eyes opened briefly, and he looked directly at me. "Found them," he whispered. "All of them. They're still there, watching us. Always watching." Then he lost consciousness again. Holloway spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Physically, he was relatively unharmed, some dehydration, minor injuries, but nothing life-threatening. Mentally, however, he was changed. He spoke of things he'd seen on the other side of the anomaly, realities stacked upon realities, places where time flowed in multiple directions simultaneously. And he spoke of Marcus Delacroix. He's there, Holloway told me during one of my visits. Or a version of him is, trapped in the overlapping spaces, unable to fully exist in any single timeline. He's aware, he's conscious, but he can't come back. None of them can fully come back. The anomaly doesn't work that way. "How did you get back?" I asked. "I don't know. One moment I was there, experiencing everything all at once. The next moment I was being pushed out, like the anomaly was rejecting me. Maybe I wasn't supposed to survive crossing over. Maybe it let me return as a warning. A warning about what? That some doors shouldn't be opened, some mysteries shouldn't be solved, because the answers are worse than not knowing." Detective Holloway spent 2 weeks in the hospital, physically unharmed but mentally shattered. He spoke of Marcus Delacroix trapped in overlapping realities, unable to fully exist in any single timeline. "He's there," Holloway told me. "Aware, conscious, but fractured across time. He can never come back. None of them can." The case was closed within a month. Classification level beyond anything I'd encountered. All evidence secured, all personnel silenced with NDAs I couldn't discuss, even with other agents. The Canaan Doom Overlook was designated a permanent monitoring site. Barriers erected, maps altered, a rotation of agents watching to ensure no one stumbles into the cold spot. Jennifer Delacroix still lives in that house. She reports seeing figures at sunset. Marcus, or something wearing his face, watching from the property line. She doesn't call anyone anymore, she just waves. And sometimes, she says, it waves back.